A horse-drawn carriage rumbles through a sun-dappled forest as its long journey toward the capital begins. The grand city of Lancet, capital of the Parkese Empire, loomed majestically beyond the carriage's steady rumble. Splendor. Pressing her hands against the glass, young Ivy gazes at the sprawling city with wide, emerald-green eyes. Enthralled by the view, the palace's beauty, finding it even more breathtaking than the books she once read described. Two snooty nobles mock Ivy's rural appearance, dismissing her as a simple country bumpkin with a rustic upbringing. Ivy senses their judgmental stares, but remains undeterred, focusing on her and feels a sudden chill. Sensing her distress, the headmistress gently takes Ivy's hands into her own, offering silent and much-needed comfort. With a warm, nostalgic smile, the headmistress admits she could look at the bustling capital all day herself. Ivy asks if she shares her excitement, and the headmistress admits the capital still feels new and fascinating. Just as fascinating. As they pass a bustling market, mistress points out the overflowing fruit stalls in the vibrant city market. Seen before. The young girl is startled when an air breaks the moment, remarking that Ivy must be from the furthest reaches of the countryside.
The brown-haired man loftily tells the child to look her fill, assuming she will never see the palace again.
With a proud shrug, the headmistress reveals the shocking truth that Ivy will be living in the palace permanently. A sudden gasp erupts from the man as pure shock as in total disbelief beam with a sense of quiet triumph. He scoffs that she must have been tricked by a swindler promising maid work, but the headmistress merely laughs. Ivy holds her clothes with a look of quiet face illuminated by a gentle light as she prepares for her new life. The man stammers in total as the mention of the academy sends a ripple of surprise through the carriage. Even nobles struggle to enter, leaving the man bewildered as to how a girl like Ivy managed the feat. Looking back, Ivy remembers how the headmistress was the happiest person of all when the acceptance letter arrived. A warm flashback shows the head. The girl knows she never could have applied to the academy without the headmistress's unwavering support and guidance. The scene shifts to a rainy night at a roadside inn where the headmistress pays for a single room. Silent crash sounding from the back. A harsh scream echoes through the flashback as a red-haired woman calls young Ivy a completely useless thing. The abusive woman looms over the cowering child, demanding. Trembling with fear, young Ivy begs for mercy as the woman continues her heartless verbal abandoned in the cult. A sharp clatter sounds as sudden sharp tap sounding as the headmistress intervenes, shielding the terrified child. Looking down in horror, the headmistress notes that the poor child is nothing but skin and bones. She furiously confronts the red-haired woman for neglecting and starving a mere 5-year-old child under her care. The red-haired woman crosses her arms and sneers, challenging the stranger for interfering in business that isn't hers. Without hesitation, the headmistress asks if she can simply take the child away from this miserable place. Greedy interest glints in the woman's eyes as she refuses to hand over her investment without a price. The woman begins a cold calculation, claiming she has spent far too much raising the girl to let her go. An audible gasp escapes the headmistress when the woman demands an astronomical 10,000 gold for the child. Ivy tries to hide her pain, but the headmistress notices a small, heartbreaking scar on her cheek and hand. Looking at the scars on the girl's face, the headmistress's resolve hardens. She will take Ivy no matter what. The headmistress pulls the girl close, whispering a soft promise that everything will be all right from this moment on. Young Ivy clings to her savior in the moonlight, finally feeling the warmth and safety of a true guardian. Ivy explains how she came to live at the shelter, working hard to earn her education instead of tuition. A cheerful Ivy runs through the halls, her long blonde hair trailing behind as she greets the day with energy. Nearby, a group of hungry children begin to bicker over the meager portions of food available. Two hungry orphans squabble over a single potato, highlighting the shelter's desperate need for more food and resources. Ivy approaches a dejected to the girl, a selfless act of sharing that touches Ivy's heart deeply. Ivy smiles warmly, moved by the children's kindness toward one another, despite their own difficult circumstances. A quiet patter of footsteps follows as Ivy walks away, deciding to endure her hunger to help the headmistress. A recruitment poster for the Imperial Gifted Academy catches her eye, promising a life-changing opportunity for those who qualify. Her eyes widen as she realizes the academy provides full food, clothing, and housing its students. Sparkling with newfound determination, Ivy realizes this is the path to helping the headmistress's heavy financial burden. Ivy excitedly tells a librarian that she intends to apply so she can earn enough money to help the shelter. Returning home, Ivy lightheartedly taps the headmistress on the shoulder to get her attention for big news. With eyes shining like stars, Ivy proudly presents her official acceptance letter to the astonished and joyful headmistress. Ivy prays in secret, desperately asking her parents to help her pass the daunting entrance exam. Thinking of her parents always makes her throat tighten, yet her desire for the academy brings them to mind. Looking out at the night sky, the blonde girl whispers a heartfelt wish to meet her parents someday. The carriage finally stops as the lively atmosphere outside confirms they have arrived at the academy's grand entrance. Ivy and the headmistress are overwhelmed, feeling as though the entire empire has gathered in one crowded place. The chatter of the massive crowd is suddenly interrupted by a loud request for everyone's immediate attention. An official announces that applicants must proceed inside alone, barring all parents from entering the academy grounds. He sternly repeats the order, warning that any student who does not enter alone will be denied admission. Heartbroken cries fill the air as young children cling to their parents, terrified of the sudden, forced separation. The headmistress watches the tearful scenes with a heavy heart, realizing the emotional weight of this milestone. She reflects on how this moment marks the very first time most of these children will leave their families. Dressed in her best clothes with her bag ready, Ivy stands tall with a courageous and bright expression. Her attention is taken by a sudden, soft choke sounding as the headmistress becomes overcome with visible emotion. Seeing Ivy's strength, the headmistress marvels at how the young girl is being the bravest of them all. Ivy flashes a reassuring smile, promising her guardian that she will study incredibly hard and not to worry. Her attention is taken by a sudden, light sniff sounding as the headmistress turns away to hide her tears. The blonde girl is surprised to see her guardian crying, softly calling out to her in concern and confusion. Her attention is taken by a sudden, firm squeeze sounding as the headmistress pulls her into a tight hug. She holds the girl close, urging her to contact the shelter immediately if anything becomes too difficult. Ivy beams with pure happiness within the warm embrace, cheerfully confirming she understands her guardian's loving instructions. A final announcement echoes across the grounds, warning that the academy gates will be closing in just moments. Ivy begins her walk toward the gate, leaving the headmistress behind to watch her small figure with pride. The brown-haired woman offers a silent, desperate prayer for the girl's success and safety in her new life. Running toward the entrance, Ivy looks back one last time as the headmistress wishes for her well-being. With a radiant smile and a vigorous wave, the blonde girl says her final goodbye before entering the academy. As more children arrive, a narrator begins to explain the deeper history behind the prestigious institution's long-awaited reopening. The Prime Minister observes the noisy crowd, delighting in the lively atmosphere that the children have finally returned. Other applicants whisper in curiosity about Ivy, wondering how such a small child met the age 7 requirement. High above in the palace, a heated debate erupts over the qualifications required for a child to enter. Officials argue at a long table, dismissively noting that a candidate is overaged and lacks standard academic grades. A man defends the child's family's wartime service, while others worry about raising voices before the emperor. Emperor Clois sighs, deciding that matters regarding the academy are important enough to warrant his personal intervention. The academy is revealed as a specialized institution under the imperial palace, reserved for the empire's most talented children. Though closed for 7 years due to war, recruiting has resumed as a symbol of the nation's stabilization. The narrator reveals the school remained closed primarily due to the tragic loss of the young Princess Ivn. A somber painting depicts the empress and her newborn, who were tragically killed during the chaos of succession. The emperor deeply mourned the daughter he never saw, leaving behind only her name as a painful memory. Watching other children from afar, the emperor's grief led some nobles to harbor ambitious plans for the throne. Shadows of scheming officials loom, plotting how to use the emperor's grief to further their own political power. It was only this year that the emperor finally granted official permission for the academy to resume operations. During the meeting, her attention is taken by a sudden soft thud sounding as a paper falls. The emperor's hand, marked by a dark scar, trembles slightly as a silent tension fills the ornate room. Emperor Clois glares with cold, piercing blue eyes, his intense gaze making everyone in the room feel uneasy. He calls out to the Prime Minister, who responds immediately with a nervous and deeply respectful tone. The Emperor sternly orders an official to pick up the discarded document that has fallen onto the floor. Holding the application, he asks why it was discarded, prompting a stuttering explanation about a lack of qualifications. Clois finds nothing lacking in the form, even as a mustache-clad official sneers at the applicant's poorhouse origins. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as the official mentions the potential for royal adoption. The emperor's expression turns icy as he demands to know who suggested he would choose an adopted heir. He furiously berates them for creating contradictory regulations designed specifically to eliminate qualified talent from the common people. Looking over a document, Emperor Clois learns a 7-year-old girl passed the upper school graduation exam in Elam City. The assembled ministers react with audible shock to the news of the child's impossible perfect scores in every subject. The Prime Minister questions the validity of a child passing an exam intended for students at least 15 years old. Aristocratic officials argue against her admission, claiming her talent alone does not justify breaking traditional school requirements and standards. In the background of elite society, the narration reflects on the Academy's resemblance to a closed, exclusive noble circle. Tensions flare as the emperor listens to officials prioritize noble seats over a talented candidate from a poorhouse. Staring intensely at the application, the blonde Emperor Clois holds the document with a hand marked by intricate scars. A sudden, sharp thud sounds as the emperor's hand slams down on the table, ending the minister's heated debate. Demanding the child's immediate admission, the emperor leaves the gathered officials paralyzed with sheer terror and utter disbelief. The emperor abruptly takes his leave, ordering the prime minister to handle the remaining details of the academy enrollment. In a final, cold command, the emperor charges the prime minister to ensure no student is rejected for their status. A heavy rattle sounds as the prime minister exits the chamber, carrying the weight of the emperor's strict decree. Panicked officials swarm the prime minister, desperately asking if the emperor mentioned any plans for the child's official adoption. Shaking them off, the prime minister clarifies that the emperor merely ordered equal management for all students and nothing else. A long sigh of relief escapes the officials as they realize the emperor didn't even ask for the girl's name. Looking back at the messy document, The Prime Minister finally searches for the name of the mysterious, high-scoring child. Meanwhile, a radiant Ivy glows with pure happiness as she officially begins her first day at the prestigious institution. A kind-faced woman named Lady Melody greets Ivy, welcoming her warmly to the Academy's grand sunlit entrance halls. In a cute display of manners, Ivy shakes Melody's hand, instantly winning over the teacher's heart with her charm. Ivy shakes her head quickly, assuring Lady Melody that her long journey from Elam wasn't difficult for her at all. Sparkling with excitement, the young girl's bright emerald eyes shine as she takes in the beauty of her surroundings. A sudden, cheerful boom sounds as Lady Melody is struck by the child's absolute cuteness and infectious, hopeful energy. A soft rustle sounds as Melody presents Ivy with an official Academy guidebook to help her find her way. Melody points out the complex layout of the campus, encouraging the young girl to ask the staff for help. Ivy becomes intensely focused, her eyes widening as she immediately begins studying every detail of the map and guidebook. A quick tap sounds as Ivy closes the book, having already absorbed the rules while Melody watches in surprise. Surrounded by imaginary flowers, the blonde girl clutches her new possession, looking like the happiest child in the world. With a polite gesture, Ivy thanks Lady Melody for the gift, her face beaming with genuine, heartfelt gratitude. Melody watches in silent awe, realizing the child possesses a level of reading talent that is truly astounding and rare. Ivy is shocked to learn that she doesn't have to return the guidebook, as it belongs to her now. Hearing she will receive many more things, Ivy stands stunned by the incredible generosity of her new life there. The young girl's jaw drops in comical surprise as she realizes the sheer scale of the Academy's financial support. Melody explains that everything she needs will be provided, reminding her of the notice she received after passing. Smiling together, they celebrate the start of Ivy's journey, where her basic necessities will finally be provided by others. The scene shifts to a spacious, sunlight-filled dorm room, complete with a large desk, bookshelf, and a cozy bed. Gasping in wonder, Ivy stares at the luxurious private room she will finally be able to call her own. The excited girl blurs through the room in a whirl of energy, absolutely delighted with her new living quarters. Melody mentions a roommate will arrive in the opposite room soon, causing a small, nervous flutter in Ivy's heart. After Melody leaves, Ivy stands alone in her room, preparing for her first official evening meal at the Academy. A distant bell chimes as Ivy's feet patter down the stairs, her excitement building for the delicious dinner ahead. Running through the halls, the blonde girl's long hair trails behind her as she eagerly heads toward the dining hall. Nearby, a group of students gathers, including a boy with brown hair who watches Ivy's arrival with cold eyes. The freckled boy narrows his eyes in a sneer, judging the simple clothes and common background of the girl. A look of deep disgust crosses the boy's face as he labels Ivy a beggar-looking commoner in his mind. Clenching his teeth, the boy blames commoners like her for taking spots that should belong to noble family members. A malicious smirk plays on his lips as he decides to personally help the girl realize her lowly status. As Ivy walks past, the boy's hand reaches out to intercept her, his intent clearly hostile and incredibly cruel. A sudden whack sounds as the boy shoves Ivy, shouting that she doesn't belong in such a grand place. Falling backward, Ivy's vision blurs while a sharp "ah" escapes her lips in a moment of sudden, painful shock. A confused "huh" escapes the bully as he suddenly finds himself on the floor, staring up at a tall stranger. Ivy blinks in a daze, wondering what just happened after the sudden collision and intervention. Her face flushes bright red as she stammers, completely overwhelmed by the presence of her mysterious savior. A striking boy with deep blue eyes and black hair gazes down with a calm, stoic expression. As the black-haired boy stands protectively, Ivy looks up at him with wide, curious eyes.
Mesmerized by his jewel-like eyes, Ivy thinks they look exactly like the precious jewels she once saw in books.
Staring intensely, the young girl, as if the beauty of his eyes is pulling her into a world of its own. A red-haired boy suddenly appears, checking if Ivy is unharmed while she remains in a state of shock. The red-haired boy sharply scolds the bully for his rudeness as Ivy quickly tries to reassure them. Crouching on the floor, the defeated bully defiantly demands to know who these two prestigious boys are. A cold sweat breaks out on the bully's face as he begins to suspect their true, high-ranking identities. A crowd gathers, whispering in awe about the handsome new students who have finally joined the Gifted Academy. Terror grips the bully as he realizes he has offended the high-ranking Lord Arcel and Lord Ruska. Realizing they belong to the legendary Viscount Ragselv and Kalen Duchy families, the bully cowers in absolute dread. Standing with an air of undeniable authority, Arcel and Ruska command the attention of everyone in the hallway. The bully sprints away in a panic, leaving Ruska to mockingly question why he is suddenly running. In absolute terror. Ruska's face turns competitive as he vows to remember the bully's face, leaving Ivy bewildered by the chaos. Arcel offers Ivy kind advice while a frantic swarm of girls descends upon him, begging for a meal. Enraptured students swarm completely blocking Ivy and leaving her caught in a chaotic crush. Shoved aside by the overzealous crowd, Ivy gasps as students rudely tell her to get out of the way. Left alone in the corridor, Ivy sighs a pang of disappointment that she never got to properly thank her saviors. Watching the massive crowd, Ivy wonders if the boys are truly such incredible celebrities at the academy. Deciding to retreat for now, Ivy hopes for a quieter opportunity to offer her gratitude in the future. Ivy quietly slips away while the popular boys remain trapped by their ever-growing circle of admirers. Arcel's gaze lingers on Ivy's retreating figure, noting she is even younger than the rumors had suggested. Arcel reflects on the news that this young girl earned a perfect score, just like his own. A formal announcement highlights the arrival of the youngest student ever admitted to the prestigious Gifted Academy. Shrouded in floral light, the golden-haired girl looks back, marking her place in the institution's history. Exhausted from the attention, Arcel and Ruska finally sit down in the dining hall to eat in peace. Their quiet meal is interrupted as a group approach their table, eagerly asking if they can sit next to them. Maintaining his cool exterior, Arcel firmly rejects the request, leaving the hopeful students to apologize and leave. Ruska suggests Arcel should be more polite, but Arcel dismissively tells his friend to handle the social pleasantries himself. Ruska stuffs his face with food, suddenly stopping as he spots someone familiar across the crowded dining hall. Nearby, Ivy is repeatedly rejected by noble students who sneer at her commoner status and simple appearance. After another cold dismissal, Ivy stands alone, unaware that Ruska is watching her struggle with pity. A sudden spark of recognition flies as Ivy and the two boys lock eyes across the room. Ruska notices Ivy heading their way, alerting Arcel as the young girl builds up her courage. Approaching politely, Ivy finally Arcel her since earlier help, and he reassures her that he's just glad she's safe. Arcel begins to welcome Ivy to join them, but Ruska abruptly interrupts with a sharp, unexpected refusal. Ruska makes a hasty excuse about Arkel's preference for silence, inadvertently sending a disappointed Ivy away. Proud of himself, Ruska proud of his light interference. Ruska awaits praise while Arcel stares at him in disbelief. A sudden, sharp scolding sounds as he calls Ruska useless, leaving the red-haired boy shocked by friend's sudden coldness. Ruska reacts with shock and frustration, unable to understand why Arcel is suddenly so angry with him. Feeling unwelcome in the cafeteria, Ivy decides to grab a sandwich and eat alone in the academy gardens. Walking through the sun-drenched grounds, she heads toward a beautiful area she spotted earlier from her room. Stunned by a sudden, sweet floral scent, Ivy wonders if a hidden flower bed is nearby. Recalling her map, she realizes. Checking the time, Ivy confidently plans a quick exploration, certain she can return before the evening curfew. Despite a small flicker of worry about being caught, she giggles and decides to take a quick look. With determination, the young girl begins crawling through the thick, overgrown bushes toward the forbidden palace grounds. A relieved pew escapes her lips as she successfully pushes through the foliage and enters the garden. Ivy arrives in a lush forest clearing, her green eyes wide as she curiously questions her new surroundings. The blonde girl discovers a serene, hidden graveyard bathed in golden sunlight and surrounded by blooming white flowers. Sweat beads on Chibi Ivy's face as she realizes the Academy guidebook never mentioned a cemetery in this forest. After finding the source of the floral scent, Ivy worries about getting caught and decides to leave immediately. Pausing, the blonde girl notices a tombstone covered in neglect and wonders why it hasn't been cleaned recently. A sudden sparkle appears as Ivy's hard work leaves the once dirty graves looking pristine and new as she instinctively cleans the grave. Recalling her past, Ivy remembers how cleaning classrooms in prep school was the only way she could afford tuition. Returning to the present, Ivy decides she must leave immediately to avoid any potential trouble for being there. Ivy suddenly freezes in place, her attention taken by a sudden, soft step sounding as she senses someone nearby. Heavy footsteps crunch on the dirt path as a mysterious figure in black boots approaches the secluded graveyard. The visitor pauses, noticing that someone has recently visited and meticulously tended to the neglected headstones. Her attention is taken by a sudden, firm step sounding as the heavy boots advance toward the unsuspecting girl. Emperor Cloyce is revealed, his handsome face marked by a cold and weary expression as he walks through the woods. His eyes narrow as he detects movement nearby, sensing an intruder hiding amongst the tall grass and flowers. Cyan's gaze falls upon Ivy, who has fallen asleep on the grass while clutching a handmade flower wreath. Bathed in golden light, the young girl sleeps peacefully, unaware that the owner of the garden is watching. A purple-haired mascot appears while Ivy asks about the strange presence she feels lingering in the garden. In a dark memory, a younger Cyan demands to know why his family cannot be buried with royalty. Officials explain that without consecration, the Empress and Princess lack the legal qualifications for burial within the royal registry. A long-haired official dismissively argues that the Empress is considered an outsider because she refused an arranged marriage. Slamming his hand down, Cyan rejects their labels and decides on a defiant plan for his family's resting place. Rejecting their rules, the Emperor decides he will keep his family by his side rather than in distant tombs. Cloyce gazes out with a heavy heart, vowing to keep the memories of his wife and daughter close to him. The council members are struck with absolute shock when Cloyce suggests placing the graves inside the Imperial Palace forest. A sudden whack sounds as Cyan draws his blade, silencing the council's protests about tradition and historical precedent. Raising his sword with authority, Cyan commands absolute silence, forcing the frightened ministers to submit to his will. Her attention is taken by a cold glare sounding as Cloyce recalls his grief during the imperial court meeting. Returning to the present, Cyan approaches the forest graves, surprised to see the fallen leaves have been cleared. He prepares to clean the headstone himself, but stops when he realizes the task has already been completed. Cyan stands over the sleeping girl, his cold expression softening slightly as he finds her nestled among the flowers. Resting her head on the soft earth, Ivy remains lost in dreams while a floral scent fills the air. Cloyce stares in utter bewilderment, wondering who this small child is and how she found this restricted forest. Staring at the tiny intruder, he wonders how a little kid managed to find this forbidden and secret place. After Cyan demands an explanation, Ivy wakes up in a panic, realizing she has stayed past her curfew. Frantically checking for the time, Ivy is relieved when the blonde man informs her it is only 6 o'clock. Chibi Ivy sighs in exhale sounding as she realizes she's safe.
Ivy asks the blonde man for his identity, while Cloyce suppresses his annoyance at being treated like a commoner.
Cyan watches her with a strange curiosity, realizing the child has no idea she is speaking to the Emperor. Ivy innocently asks if he is a professor at the academy, causing the blonde man to pause in surprise.
Cyan reveals his name to the wide-eyed girl, leaving her momentarily stunned by the authoritative presence he carries.
Surrounded by an aura of flowers, Ivy smiles brightly at Cyan, looking like the picture of pure, innocent joy. Cloyce is suddenly haunted by a memory of his late wife, Chloe, discussing the appearance of their unborn child. In a golden memory, Cyan and Chloe discuss their future family while sitting together in the sunlit garden. Chloe laughs softly, wishing for their child to inherit Cyan's strength and handsome features more than her own. She envisioned a beautiful daughter, making green eyes, just like the girl standing before him. Overwhelmed by the resemblance, Cyan thinks of the child he lost, seeing her reflection in Ivy's hopeful gaze. A somber image shows Cyan standing alone at the grave of his daughter, Lillian, lost in his enduring grief. Ivy tilts her head in curiosity, wondering why the man is staring at her with such an intense expression. Came to this forbidden area, questioning if she understands the gravity of her trespassing. Fidgeting nervously, Ivy explains that the irresistible scent of the flowers drew her into the woods without thinking. Ivy asks Professor Cyan if she has trespassed, her green eyes wide with worry as she looks up. Looking down at the small girl, Cyan warns her that wandering alone isn't always a good idea. Cyan gently places a fallen leaf in Ivy's hand, causing her to blink in quiet, wide-eyed surprise. Beaming with gratitude, Ivy promises to remember his kindness as she clutches the small token to her chest. Her attention is taken by a sudden, soft flutter, sounding as Ivy's green eye sparkles with newfound admiration. Wide-eyed with panic, Ivy gasps upon realizing the late hour and the urgent need to return to the academy. Cyan offers to walk her back, his expression calm as he checks if she can manage the journey alone. Insisting she can find her own way, Ivy thanks him once more before preparing to make her exit. Cyan watches in bewilderment as the small girl dives back into the thicket, her exit as chaotic as her arrival. Popping her head out from the leaves, Ivy loudly introduces herself as Ivy Alden before disappearing into the brush. The blonde man remains still, his sharp gaze softening as he reflects on the name and the girl's spirited departure. Cyan stands alone in the sun-drenched clearing, watching the bushes settle after Ivy's energetic escape into the forest. Reflecting on his patience, Cyan admits he cannot stay angry when confronted by children of such an innocent age. Kneeling solemnly by the grave, the man thinks of his daughter, Ivy N, who would have been Ivy's age today. A glint on the grass catches his eye, leading him to wonder what object the small girl left behind. Cyan reaches down and picks up a discarded, dirty handkerchief, his fingers tracing the fabric left in the clearing. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp huff, sounding as a maid tells Chibi Ivy to arrive earlier tomorrow. Climbing the stairs with a sigh of relief, Ivy feels lucky to have avoided a scolding for her tardiness. The blonde girl stops abruptly, her attention taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as she realizes something is wrong. Searching her bag frantically, Ivy's heart sinks as she realizes a precious item has gone missing during her adventure. Tears well in her eyes as she discovers her empty bag, mourning the loss of her cherished handkerchief.
Ivy perks up with hope, realizing she might have an excuse to see the kind Professor Cyan once again.
Reaching her dormitory door, Ivy hesitates for a moment before pushing it open to enter her new living space. Her attention is taken by a sudden, heavy thud sounding as Ivy finds her room filled with unfamiliar, staring faces. Ivy stands frozen in the doorway, confused why so many students are gathered in what should be her private room. A dark-haired girl recognizes her as the orphanage student, prompting Ivy to nervously confirm her identity as Ivy Alton. Two noble girls mock Ivy's status and messy appearance, laughing at the academy for accepting a commoner from an orphanage. Looking down at her wrinkled clothes, Ivy silently admits the forest trek left her looking less than presentable. Ivy's gaze lands on a silver-haired girl standing at the center of the group, whose presence feels cold and imposing. The silver-haired girl stares back with piercing purple eyes, her elegant appearance contrasting sharply with Ivy's current disheveled state. Irene commands the gossiping girls to stop, even as they complain about a commoner being assigned as their roommate. Stepping closer, the noble girl towers over Ivy, inspecting the smaller girl with a critical and unyielding gaze. Ivy flinches in shock as Irene coldly calls her pathetic, her harsh words echoing through the tense dormitory room. Irene continues her cruel evaluation, pointing out Ivy's scrawny frame and messy hair with an air of absolute disdain. The silver-haired girl asks a stinging question about whether the orphanage starved its children, deepening Ivy's visible distress. Irene doubles down on her insults, calling Ivy a complete disaster while the others watch the one-sided confrontation. Repeating her cruel inquiry, Irene asks if the children at the poorhouse are neglected, her voice dripping with mockery. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp snap sounding as Irene shouts that Ivy's claims are simply not true. Clenching her fist in silent fury, Ivy declares that while she ignores personal insults, she won't tolerate bad-mouthing the director. Ivy shouts with fierce loyalty. A heavy silence falls over the room as the noble girls stare at Ivy, stunned by her sudden, passionate outburst. The girls react with indignation, demanding to know who Ivy thinks she is to scream at them in such a manner. Angered by the commoner's lack of decency, they demand that Ivy apologize to Lady Irene immediately for her outburst. With a simple, silent gesture, Irene stops her followers, her expression remaining chillingly calm as she steps forward. Irene gazes down at Ivy with an unreadable expression, her purple eyes flickering with a moment of intense scrutiny. Shifting their tone to a mock politeness, the girls offer to show the way as they prepare to leave. The group sweeps out of the room, loudly discussing the academy's vast cafeterias while leaving a bewildered Ivy behind. Her attention is taken by a sudden. Ivy watches the group depart, her expression a mix of exhaustion and confusion after the hostile encounter in her room. Irene pauses for a final look back, her cold purple eyes lingering on the blonde girl standing alone in the doorway. Ivy blinks her wide green eyes in contemplation, her thoughts lingering on the events of the previous day. The morning shines over the academy as the clock tower bells ring out, signaling the start of a new day. Twirling in front of the mirror, Ivy glows with excitement as she admires her neat new academy uniform. Peeking out from her room, Ivy notices the quiet hallway and realizes her silver-haired roommate hasn't emerged yet. Reflecting on Irene's cold behavior from the night before, Ivy wonders if there is more to the girl's icy exterior. Clutching a yellow handkerchief, Ivy thinks that Irene might not be as bad as her first impression suggested. Determined to be polite, Ivy decides to check on Irene and offer an apology for their earlier heated confrontation. Ivy prepares to knock, but a sudden, loud thud against the door startles the young girl into wide-eyed shock. Opening the door with a curious smile,
Ivy finds herself face to face with two unfamiliar students waiting in the hall.
The two noble girls react with immediate annoyance, looking down at Ivy and questioning why she is still there. Ignoring Ivy's attempts to explain, the pair continues to mock her, their judgmental expressions casting her in a pathetic light. With a haughty sniff, the orange-haired girl warns Ivy that a commoner has no business speaking to Lady Irene. Cruelly dismissing her, the girls order Ivy to get lost while claiming they will be the ones attending to Irene. A sharp click sounds as the door is unceremoniously shut, leaving a stunned Ivy standing alone in the grand hallway. Looking back at the closed door, Ivy realizes with a pang of loneliness that Irene already has plenty of friends. Despite the cold rejection, Ivy clutches her bag strap and tries to maintain her resolve for the day ahead. Outside the room, the two noble girls gossiped spitefully about the random dorm assignments that paired a commoner with Irene. The girls' sneering conversation is interrupted by the sound of the door opening, causing them both to jump in surprise. Irene steps into the hallway with regal poise, greeted instantly by the overly enthusiastic and sycophantic pair. Maintaining her stoic demeanor, Irene offers a polite greeting and asks the girls if their morning preparations went smoothly. The orange-haired girl suggests Irene should treat her commoner roommate like a maid to make her own life easier. They continue to lie to Irene, claiming they had to chase away the ill-mannered child for being in the way. The gray-haired girl nods eagerly, falsely accusing Ivy of not knowing her place among the high-ranking noble students. Irene's expression darkens with hidden rage as she thinks about how she would deal with them if not for a promise. Sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere, the gray-haired girl asks Irene to repeat her whispered, menacing comment. Ignoring the question, Irene turns away coldly and commands the group to begin heading down to the main hall. Shaking with visible fear, the two noble girls wonder if they have unknowingly offended the intimidating silver-haired lady. The scene shifts to the academy grounds where the morning roll call begins, announcing names of the arriving students. Ivy watches as a teacher informs the gathered class that they will soon begin their tour of the Imperial Palace. Walking among her peers, Ivy overhears the other girls excitedly discussing their nerves and the presence of the boys. A rhythmic tap of footsteps follows Ivy as she notices several students staring and whispering as she passes by. Ivy's eyes widen in realization as she hears the surrounding girls gossiping about her involvement in yesterday's forest rumors. Feeling the weight of dozens of judgmental eyes, Ivy stands small in the courtyard, sensing the hostile atmosphere around her. A friendly girl with brown pigtails and purple eyes introduces herself as Lamora Yesel, breaking Ivy's moment of isolation. Leaning in with a warm and bright smile, Lamora asks Ivy if she would mind if they walk together. Ivy is overjoyed at the prospect of a friend, but her excitement wavers when Lamora mentions her orphanage background. Lamora quickly reassures her, explaining that she is also from a commoner background and understands Ivy's difficult position. Pointing to herself, Lamora hides her origins, leaving Ivy looking on in total awe. Ivy expresses her deep relief at finding a kindred spirit, though Lamora's expression shifts into a playfully suspicious grin. Lamora tells Ivy there is one specific burning question she has been waiting to ask her since they met. Leaning in close, Lamora asks if Ivy was actually secretly adopted by a powerful and wealthy noble family. She continues her interrogation, wondering if Ivy is perhaps the hidden illegitimate child of a high-ranking imperial official. When Ivy looks bewildered, Lamora playfully accuses her of playing innocent while claiming she already knows the truth. Lamora leans in with intense curiosity, demanding to know the secret of how Ivy managed to pull off such a feat. Ivy frantically denies the claims, explaining she has never even met the Emperor or been to the capital before. Lamora looks skeptical, her gaze lingering on Ivy as she insists that the rumors she heard were very specific. A sudden, loud scream of "Kya!" erupts as two handsome boys, Arcel and Luska, walk through the crowded courtyard. Surrounded by a growing swarm of admirers, the two popular boys draw everyone's attention away from the girls' conversation. Lamora explains that Arcel and Luska are the elite candidates expected to be adopted as the Emperor's own sons. She details Arcel's academic brilliance and Luska's legendary physical prowess, marking them as the future stars of the Empire. Lamora explains the Terran's family's wealth, while students dream of securing a prestigious political marriage for themselves. Lamora assures Ivy that the famous boys are kind, claiming she has already befriended them several times before. Ivy excitedly notices the popular students approaching, causing Lamora to look toward them with visible surprise and shock. Her attention is taken by a sudden, heavy step sounding as the black-haired Arcel walks past, greeted by Ivy. Lamora panics internally over Ivy's social audacity, while the blonde girl offers a cheerful greeting to the stoic boy. Ivy warmly compliments Arcel's appearance, prompting the typically distant black-haired student to offer a rare, polite verbal response. Her attention is taken by a sudden, light tap sounding as Arcel promises Ivy a more formal greeting later. Lamora's eyes sparkle with frantic desperation as she begs Ivy to introduce her to the high-status black-haired student. Ivy readily agrees to perform the introduction, though Arcel remains standing with a stoic and unreadable expression. Arcel abruptly interrupts the plan, coldly stating he is far too exhausted for introductions or socializing today. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick whoosh sounding as Arcel walks away, leaving both girls standing alone. Ivy watches him go, innocently concluding that Lord Arcel must truly be overworked to look so visibly tired. Forcing a bright smile despite the awkward rejection, Lamora optimistically notes they will find another chance to meet. Ivy suggests returning to the official tour, leading the way toward the grand architecture of the Imperial Palace. Lamora politely excuses herself, claiming she needs to return to her original group of friends for the tour. Her attention is taken by a sudden, swift dash sounding as Lamora departs, leaving Ivy alone in the courtyard. Her attention is taken by a sudden, rhythmic tap sounding as Lamora rejoins her suspicious and questioning peer group. Her attention is taken by a sudden, eager bustle sounding as the girls grill Lamora about Ivy's rumored background.
Lamora nervously backtracks on her previous claims, admitting that Ivy's connection to the Emperor seemed strangely vague. A stunned silence falls over the small group as the noble students react with confusion to Lamora's inconsistency. The blue-haired student angrily confronts Lamora for spreading false rumors, while the girl frantically tries to explain herself. Lamora defends her information, Ivy's familiar greeting toward Arcel, suggesting there must be some hidden truth. She argues that Ivy's acquaintance with Lord Arcel proves she was indeed chosen by His Majesty the Emperor. The girls are easily swayed back to belief, leaving Lamora internally sweating over her desperate and risky social manipulation. The blue-haired student offers a sincere apology for doubting her friend. Lamora laughs off the tension with feigned modesty, though her internal thoughts remain focused on her next scheme. Lamora A determined and calculating glint appears in Lamora's eyes as she fixates on exposing the blonde girl's secrets. The tour guide showcases the magnificent Imperial Palace, describing it as the largest and most grand complex on the continent. Her attention is taken by a selective whoa sounding as the students marvel at the breathtaking scale of the palace. Her attention is taken by a sudden, intense stare sounding as Ivy notices mysterious dark marks marring the stone walls. Her attention is taken by a sudden, low whisper sounding as students notice the widespread damage across the palace walls. Her attention is taken by a sudden, soft chuckle sounding as the guide explains these marks are war remnants. A curious student questions why the palace remains damaged while the capital's streets have been fully repaired already. The guide explains that the emperor selflessly prioritized fixing the homes and facilities of his people over the palace.
Ivy pauses in thought, feeling a profound and strange sense of familiarity with the tale of the emperor's sacrifice. There's the orphanage director explaining how imperial funds ensured they would have food for winter. Gazing up, Ivy realizes her home would have been forgotten if not for the emperor's direct and kind intervention. Her attention is taken by a sudden, hopeful tug sounding as Ivy spots a familiar figure in the distance. Overwhelmed with joy and sudden recognition, Ivy's eyes sparkle as she identifies the person standing across the grounds. Her attention is taken by a sudden heavy thud sounding as Cian Lowen interrupts the chaotic and shouting officials. Standing with absolute authority, Cian Lowen sternly rebukes the palace officials for their lack of professionalism and constant bickering. Her attention is taken by a sounding as Cian's sharp questioning silences the room of noblemen. Her attention is taken by a sudden, firm step sounding as Cian calls for a break from the meeting. Cian stops in surprise as he hears Ivy's enthusiastic shout, finding the small blonde girl waving frantically outside. Her attention is taken by a sudden, curious peek sounding as Ivy shyly offers a greeting to the blonde professor. Her attention is taken by a sudden, happy peek sounding as Ivy beams with pure delight at seeing Cian. Her attention is taken by a sudden, light flutter sounding as Cian recalls that today is the academy tour. Cian observes the tiny girl standing alone before a grand window. The blonde-haired emperor reflects deeply on a lingering, uncertain possibility. Radiant with joy, the blonde-haired Ivy smiles brightly as she anticipates the wonders of the upcoming palace tour. The blonde-haired man walks alongside the small girl, gently guiding her through the academy's elegant, sunlit grounds. Her attention is taken by a sudden, low hum sounding as a mysterious, magical mark glows upon his hand. Dressed in ornate imperial regalia, the blonde-haired emperor gestures regally, commanding the undivided attention of those around him. In a grand meeting hall, a confused nobleman questions why the emperor has suddenly stopped to stare out the window. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as the emperor offers a visibly awkward excuse about an insect. A frantic maid promises a high-ranking noble that the palace will be cleaned immediately to remove any unwanted pests. The nobility watches in stunned silence as the emperor continues his strange behavior, ignoring the important state meeting entirely. Her attention is taken by a sudden, heavy thud sounding as the emperor finally sits, ordering the meeting to resume. A nobleman suggests a gradual implementation plan while the emperor listens stoically to the ongoing debate about tax reform. Internally, the emperor cringes at his clumsy excuse while simultaneously focusing on a system to protect vulnerable tenant farmers. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp look sounding as the emperor reacts poorly to a nobleman's disagreement. The room falls into an uneasy silence after the emperor curtly thanks his subordinates for their begrudging cooperation. The tour guide calls for the students' attention, ushering the excited group toward the heart of the central palace. Standing before a massive staircase, the guide details the various administrative and social functions of the grand imperial building. A brown-haired guard in silver armor approaches the group, curiously asking if they are the visiting academy students. The imperial guards greet the promising students with warmth, expressing their delight at crossing paths during the official tour.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, playful pat sounding as the guard greets his young nephew with visible pride. The guard offers words of encouragement to the students, while Lamora notes the importance of having powerful palace connections. Ivy looks on with wide-eyed wonder, realizing that having friends and family within the palace makes academy life much easier. As the tour progresses through the hall, a group of noble students walks ahead, their whispers filling the air. Lamora watches Ivy with a dark and calculating expression, her purple eyes narrowed as she prepares her next social attack. Her attention is taken by a sudden, soft gnaw sounding as Lamora bites her nail, envying those with genuine connections. A blue-haired student asks Lamora if she is ready to proceed with the plan they discussed earlier that morning. The noble girls pressure Lamora to act, reminding her of her promise to confirm the rumors surrounding the orphanage girl. Lamora steels herself for the confrontation, realizing this is the perfect moment to expose Ivy in front of the crowd. Encouraged by her peers, Lamora prepares to approach Ivy, determined to turn the blonde-haired girl into a social pariah. Her attention is taken by a sudden, steady step sounding as Lamora walks toward her target with a malicious grin. Lamora focuses her spiteful energy on the task ahead, convinced she is about to prove Ivy is a pathetic liar. Approaching Ivy loudly, Lamora questions if the girl is jealous of others' connections despite her alleged backing from the Emperor. Lamora publicly accuses Ivy of claiming she was personally handpicked by His Majesty, leaving the blonde girl looking utterly bewildered. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Lamora mocks Ivy's orphanage background and labels her a liar. The tour guide and the Imperial Guard intervene as the loud argument threatens to disrupt the peace of the palace. The brown-haired guard steps forward with a stern expression, demanding that the girls clear up the confusing situation immediately. The guard rebukes Ivy for supposedly using the Emperor's name in a lie, demanding a sincere apology for her social audacity. Ivy desperately maintains her innocence while Lamora smirks, enjoying the success of her calculated and cruel social manipulation. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick turn sounding as the guard reacts to an unexpected voice from behind. Her attention is taken by a sudden, cold shock sounding as the guard recognizes the high-status boy approaching the group. Arcel steps forward with absolute authority, shocking the crowd by confirming that Ivy was indeed handpicked by the Emperor. The black-haired boy explains that Ivy's academic brilliance earned her the spot despite the initial rejection based on her status. Her attention is taken by a sudden, fearful hic sounding as Arcel reveals his father heard this directly from the Emperor. Horrified by his mistake, her attention is taken by a sudden, hurried dash sounding as the guard flees while students whisper about Ivy's genius. Lamora stands in frozen shock, realizing the rumors she tried to weaponize against Ivy were actually the absolute truth. Her attention is taken by a sudden, cold sweat sounding as Lamora realizes the magnitude of her failed social gamble. Turning his cold gaze toward Lamora, Arcel asks her why she went out of her way to cause such trouble. Arcel stares down the trembling girl, his intense blue eyes filled with silent judgment and a demand for an explanation. Her attention is taken by a sudden, heavy dread, sounding as Lamora shrinks under the weight of Arcel's crushing social authority. Stuttering and terrified, Lamora tries to find an excuse while her friends watch her fall from grace in stunned silence. Lamora's frustration boils over as her friends feign ignorance after encouraging her failed social attack against Ivy. Looking visibly shaken, Lamora offers a weak excuse for her behavior, claiming she never intended things to escalate. Arcel watches the trembling girl with a stoic and unreadable expression, his cold blue eyes offering no comfort. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp snap sounding as Arcel bluntly warns Lamora to think before acting. Her attention is taken by a sudden, rhythmic thud sounding as Arcel walks away, leaving a humiliated Lamora behind. Her attention is taken by a sudden, soft rustle sounding as Arcel reflects on his recurring role as protector. Watching the girl from a distance, Arcel wonders if the blonde girl will come to thank him again today. Ivy's face erupts into a radiant and sparkling expression. Her attention is taken by a sudden, rapid thump sounding as Ivy's heart swells with pride over the Emperor's favor. Relieved that her status is secure, Ivy celebrates the fact that she won't be expelled for unintentional disrespect. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick swish sounding as Ivy dances with joy, while Lamora watches bitterly. Her attention is taken by a sudden, tight creak sounding as Lamora's knuckles whiten while clutching her dress. Seething with resentment, Lamora blames Ivy for her public humiliation and assumes the blonde girl is mocking her. A dark and vengeful shadow. Her attention is taken by a sudden, worried gasp sounding as the blue-haired student asks if Lamora is all right. Lamora's friends offer a shallow apology, but their lack of genuine concern only fuels her internal irritation. The noble girls question Arcel's motives, suspecting his relationship with Ivy is far deeper than they originally thought. Her attention is taken by a sudden, mean snicker sounding as the girls mock Ivy's status as a lowly orphan. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sinister hiss sounding as Lamora begins to form a new, malicious plan. Gathering in the shadows, the group of noble girls plots their next move to isolate and destroy Ivy's reputation. In a series of comedic moments, Arcel dodges fans, while Ivy's adorable expressions leave him wondering if she likes him. The tour guide gathers the students, announcing that their final stop will be the historic Imperial Palace History Hall. Ivy listens eagerly as the guide grants the students permission to explore the Grand History Hall at their leisure. Exhausted from the long day, many students choose to rest on ornate chairs rather than study the imperial exhibits. The noble girls discuss seeing the Ivy's curiosity is piqued at the mention of the Emperor's likeness, her green eyes widening with sincere interest. Her attention is taken by a sudden, mocking giggle sounding as the girls lead Ivy toward their hidden trap. Filled with gratitude, Ivy views the Emperor as her true savior and desires to see the man who saved her. Her attention is taken by a sudden, hollow boom sounding as Ivy finds only an empty frame undergoing restoration. Disappointment washes over Ivy as she realizes the portrait she came to see is currently missing from the hall. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sneaky tsk sounding as Ivy decides to explore the other royal exhibits. Her attention is taken by a sudden, soft step sounding as Ivy wanders through the gallery, admiring the art. Pausing before a portrait of a young girl, Ivy marvels at the child's princess-like beauty and her stuffed rabbit. Ivy stands frozen in awe, her gaze captured by a particularly magnificent and lifelike portrait further down the hall. A breathtaking painting of a red-haired woman in an elegant green dress radiates a warm and regal presence. Her attention is taken by a sudden, faint hum sounding as Ivy remains spellbound by the mysterious woman's beauty. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Ivy finally snaps out of her deep trance. Realizing the silence is absolute, Ivy looks around in confusion, noticing the hall has become completely deserted. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp click sounding as Ivy discovers the heavy exit door is locked. Her attention is taken by a sudden, rhythmic clatter sounding as Ivy frantically rattles the handle to no avail. Outside, the silver-haired roommate looks around with growing anxiety, while the blonde girl cries out from behind the door. Her attention is taken by a sudden. The guide prepares to lead the group back to the dorms, unaware that one student is missing. Stepping forward with urgency, the silver-haired girl informs the teacher that Ivy is nowhere to be found. The roommate provides a detailed description of Ivy, emphasizing her small stature, pale blonde hair, and green eyes. Her attention is taken by a sudden, nervous gulp sounding as the guide realizes the gravity of the disappearance. The guide explains that the palace will soon be restricted, making Ivy's absence a critical and dangerous matter. An elderly man with a cane arrives, his stern presence immediately commanding the attention of the panicked group. Her attention is taken by a sudden, thunderous roar sounding as the Minister of State rebukes the guide's negligence. The Minister of State questions the brown-haired guide about the missing girl's roommate, learning that Ivy had been wandering alone. Stunned by the news, the minister is horrified to realize that no one has any knowledge of the young girl's current location. The guide asks if they must delay the search until morning, but the elderly man remains silent and deeply troubled by the situation. A somber memory of the War of Succession 7 years ago flashes back, showing a blonde man holding a fallen companion. Recalling the emperor's personal tragedy during the conflict, the minister explains why strict palace curfews were established to prevent future loss. Looking weary and stressed, the minister admits that Ivy's unknown whereabouts are a grave concern given the strictly enforced rules. The black-haired girl and her pink-haired friend are visibly terrified as the minister reveals that execution is the punishment for rule breakers. Holding her clipboard, the guide vows to join the search at dawn while silently praying for Ivy's safety throughout the night. The guide commands the remaining students to return to the dormitory immediately, ending the day's excursion on a dark and tense note. Inside the hall, a loud thud, thud, thud echoes as Ivy desperately bangs on the door, shouting for someone to help her. Ivy winces in pain and clutches her hands, realizing with growing dread that the palace doors have been barred for the night. Taking a deep breath, Ivy tries to remain calm and hopes the guide will realize her absence and return to rescue her. Panic flares in Ivy's green eyes as she notices several portraits in the dark hall suddenly glowing with eerie, staring eyes. Frightened by the terrifying shroud cast over the dark paintings, Ivy backs away, her heart racing as the shadows deepen around her. Tap, tap, tap sound her footsteps as Ivy runs toward a sliver of moonlight, hoping to find safety away from the shadows. Finding a patch of light on the floor, Ivy stops to catch her breath and decides it is best to wait there. Ivy huddles on the floor with a soft plop, resolving to stay brave as long as she avoids looking at the portraits. Her attention is caught by something unexpected, causing her to gasp in surprise as she looks up toward the wall. Ivy is mesmerized by a grand portrait of a beautiful woman with red hair, finding her face comforting rather than frightening. Huddling against her knees with a small sigh, Ivy tries to rest, feeling certain that her teachers will eventually come for her. Shivering in the massive, drafty hall, Ivy whispers about the biting cold while sitting alone beneath the gaze of the red-haired lady. In the dormitory, a red-haired boy asks the black-haired Arcel if he has heard the news regarding Ivy's disappearance before curfew. Arcel listens with a concerned expression as the boy explains how Ivy seemingly lost her way just before the palace was locked. The red-haired boy gestures while explaining that even the academy's staff are forbidden from entering the palace grounds during the curfew. Arcel stares ahead grimly, processing the fact that the search for the missing girl won't resume until the following morning. Looking down thoughtfully, Arcel recalls that he and his friend possess special imperial passes, sparking a daring plan in his mind. Determination flashes in Arcel's blue eyes as he decides to take action and find Ivy Alden himself, regardless of the risks.
Moving through the dark, Arcel leads his nervous companion into the pitch-black palace, the sound of their soft footsteps echoing. Arcel scans the vast, silent surroundings, encouraging his hesitant friend to continue searching for the girl they believe is nearby. A sudden, authoritative voice rings out from the shadows. While his red-haired friend trembles in total panic, Arcel remains composed, deciding it is best to speak the truth to the guard. Stepping forward, Arcel identifies himself and Luska, explaining that their special passes should justify their presence within the palace. Arcel and Luska wait with bated breaths, wondering if the unseen man will accept their excuse for being out so late. The voice coldly retorts that the passes were never intended for such reckless use, leaving the boys paralyzed with sudden realization. Arcel's eyes widen as he recognizes the voice, looking up in shock at the tall, blonde man standing before him. The blonde-haired emperor stares down at the boys with an icy, intimidating gaze, his presence commanding immediate and absolute respect. A brief explanation reveals the special imperial passes are prestigious tokens granted to noble houses that served during the Succession War. The emperor warns Arcel and Luska that another violation of the curfew will lead to the permanent confiscation of their permits. Trembling with fear, Luska and Arcel bow low and offer a frantic apology for their intrusion into the sovereign's territory. The emperor maintains a stern silence as he looks over the two boys, his unreadable expression causing them to sweat nervously. Letting out a tired sigh, the emperor tells them that their reflection is enough, trusting they will not repeat such a mistake. Seizing the moment, Arcel explains that they only came because a student from the Gifted Academy went missing earlier that day. The emperor is visibly stunned as he recalls the image of Ivy, realizing that the small child is currently lost somewhere inside. Looking away thoughtfully, the emperor notes that searching the massive palace randomly is impossible and that there is a bigger problem. Outside, massive magic circles glow over the palace towers as security measures activate, leaving very few staff members available for duty. Despite Arcel's plea to continue the search, the emperor firmly orders the two boys to return to their dormitory at once. To the boys' shock, the emperor announces he will summon Serafina to find the girl, leaving Arcel and Luska completely speechless. Serafina is described as a legendary prodigy of the academy who never lost her top rank during her entire student career. Now serving as the head of the Gifted Academy, Serafina is renowned as the most powerful living mage in the entire empire. Arcel realizes the emperor intends to use high-level magic for the search, despite magic being strictly prohibited within the palace walls. A visual warning suggests that if the sovereign breaks established rules, the public's trust in royalty will shatter. While Arcel watches from the shadows, the emperor commands his men to summon Serafina to the palace storage immediately. Looking completely stunned, the green-haired Serafina reacts with shock at the sudden, high-priority summons from the sovereign himself. In the storage room, the emperor informs Serafina that a young student has gone missing within the palace grounds. Serafina stares at the blonde-haired man in utter disbelief, her mind racing with the gravity of his unusual request. The emperor orders Serafina to track the child using magic, despite her concern over using a royal mana stone. A vision of the emperor on his throne illustrates the political turmoil that follows when a ruler violates palace protocols. Watching the emperor closely, Serafina wonders if there is a deeper, hidden motive behind his intense concern for the girl. Despite her nerves, Serafina grows excited at the rare chance to cast such a massive, high-level spell within palace walls. Scanning the shelves of precious artifacts, Serafina feels relieved to find a mana stone that perfectly matches her magical wavelength. Holding a glowing green mana stone,
Serafina explains how magical disturbances in the palace often interrupt the flow of energy. Serafina accidentally mentions that Lillian used to help her, immediately covering her mouth in a panic for misspeaking.
A terrifying aura surrounds the Emperor as he glares at Serafina, his eyes narrowing with a sharp, intimidating intensity.
The Emperor warns Serafina that her past closeness with his wife won't save her from the consequences of being dishonest. Shaking with fear, Serafina begins to explain that the late Lillian possessed abilities that were considered very unusual. Recalling a moment of magical connection, Serafina explains how Lillian's mere presence significantly increased her magical precision. Looking away thoughtfully, Serafina wonders why she is only now realizing the significance of Lillian's unique influence on her magic. Beside a stone lion statue, Serafina reveals Lillian wanted to hide her strange powers after being called a witch. Serafina admits Lillian didn't fully grasp her own power, while the Emperor remains silent and deeply affected by the revelation. Sensing the tense atmosphere, Serafina offers to return to the main palace and prepare for the search immediately. Tock, tock, tock sound her footsteps as Serafina hurries away, feeling incredibly lucky to have escaped the Emperor's wrath. Hoo, ooh, ooh sounds the wind as Ivy huddles on the floor, shivering from the biting cold in the gallery. Ivy tells herself the cold is easy to endure compared to her painful past life before the Gifted Academy. A memory of a large wooden inn flashes back as a harsh voice screams at the young girl to work. Tiny young Ivy stands trembling before a red-haired woman who cruelly orders her to clean the stables and manure. Customers at the inn point out that Ivy is too young for such labor, but the woman scoffs at them. Sounds Ivy's exertion as she struggles to lift a heavy shovel in a horse stall, fearing she'll lose dinner. Wah sounds Ivy's cry as she collapses under the weight of the shovel while trying to finish her chores. A creak sounds from the door as a filthy Ivy returns, only to be mocked for the smell of manure. A metallic clang rings out as the cruel woman throws a single potato at the floor for the starving child. Picking up the humble meal, Ivy recalls how moving to the orphanage felt like entering heaven by comparison. At the orphanage, Ivy enjoyed regular meals and the company of other children without being forced into grueling labor. Back in the present, Ivy smiles softly to herself, feeling that meeting the academy director was her greatest luck. Whack sounds the air as Ivy is suddenly startled by a strange movement in the dark hallway. Ivy's eyes widen as a faint, shimmering glow begins to illuminate the darkness surrounding her hiding spot. A magical whoosh sounds as glowing trails flow through the window, leaving Ivy wondering what strange phenomenon is occurring. Watching the golden light dance past the portraits, Ivy wonders if she is witnessing a ghost in the palace. Sailgum sounds the light's movement as Ivy watches the trails near her feet, her fear growing in the silent hall. Took sounds the trail as it settles, and Ivy finds herself compelled to follow the gentle, glowing ribbons of magic. The blonde girl looks ahead with curiosity, her initial terror fading into a sense of wonder as she watches the light. Whack sounds as Ivy turns her head, sensing something watching her from the shadows of the portrait hall. Looking up at the portrait of the red-haired lady, Ivy is certain she just heard a kind, familiar voice calling. The glowing trail swirls around Ivy, its soft light reflecting in her large, emerald green eyes as she watches. Reaching out toward the light, Ivy feels comforted by a gentle voice and believes that everything will be fine. Ivy stands bathed in a brilliant golden glow, her heart filled with a strange sense of peace despite being trapped. Sounds the mana as Serafina focuses her power on the green stone, beginning the palace-wide search spell. Determination burns in Serafina's eyes as she channels her mana, her focus absolute as she searches for the missing girl. Looking up from the Mana Stone, Seraphina triumphantly announces that she has located Ivy Alden near the portrait room. Tock, tock, tock sound the heavy boots of the rescuers as they sprint toward the history hall to find Ivy. Knock knock sounds the door as a voice calls out to Ivy, finally reaching the trapped and relieved blonde girl. A voice calling her name startles Ivy as Seraphina and the search party finally locate her. Shouting with relief, Seraphina hoists the blonde girl into the air while Ivy offers a humble, stuttering apology. Seraphina checks the child for a fever, worried that her earlier magical flash might have frightened the young student.
Overwhelmed by Seraphina's sudden suggestion to become a mage, a dizzy Ivy struggles to process the headmaster's high energy.
The other staff members watch in stunned silence as the green-haired headmaster playfully carries the missing child away. Ivy looks up with wide, emerald eyes as Seraphina decides they must return to the academy before speaking further. Reflecting on the Academy handbook, Seraphina realizes she underestimated the youth of an incredibly important and powerful imperial figure.
Carrying Ivy securely, Seraphina commands Arsel and Luska to head back to their own dormitories and finally rest. Back, her expression turning uncharacteristically somber and deeply thoughtful. A beautiful portrait of the late Lillian is shown, her reddish-purple hair and kind eyes captured in an ornate frame. Standing alone, the blonde-haired emperor stares toward the portrait, his face clouded with a heavy, unspoken sense of longing. Hu sounds the emperor's heavy sigh as he closes his eyes, clearly weighed down by memories of his wife. The scene returns to Seraphina, who maintains a serious expression as she carries the small girl through the palace. Seeing their friend safe at last, the red-haired Luska cries out in excitement while Arsel watches with quiet relief. Stepping forward, the black-haired Arsel asks the headmaster if Ivy is truly unharmed after her long ordeal alone. Seraphina credits the boys for Ivy's rescue today, leaving the blonde girl surprised that her classmates were so worried. Seraphina accidentally mentions the boys' near encounter with the sovereign, nearly exposing the secret of the emperor's personal involvement. Realizing she just broke a royal promise, Seraphina panics while the emperor's silent warning echoes in her racing mind. Sounds Seraphina's nervous laughter as she tells a clumsy lie to cover up the emperor's secret participation. Arsel looks at Ivy with a sharp, discerning gaze, stating that there is one crucial detail he must verify. Looking directly at Ivy, Arsel asks if she believes someone trapped her in the portrait room on purpose. Ivy breaks into a nervous sweat, her eyes darting away as she struggles to find the right words to answer. Recalling the strange behavior of 3 other students earlier, Ivy hesitates to voice her suspicions without any concrete proof. Deciding to hide the truth, Ivy insists it was her own mistake and that the palace paintings simply distracted her. Seraphina's sharp eyes notice Ivy's swollen hand, immediately shifting her focus toward getting the child's injury treated. Seated comfortably at a table, Seraphina begins to carefully apply medicine and bandages to Ivy's small, injured hand. With a proud flourish, Seraphina presents the finished bandages, much to the curiosity and relief of the blonde girl. Ivy offers a polite bow of gratitude, while Seraphina asks if she can manage the short walk home alone. Waving her bandaged hand, Ivy smiles and says goodbye, as Seraphina promises they will meet again very soon. Once Ivy is out of earshot, the atmosphere turns cold as Seraphina and Arsel stand together in grim silence. Arsel asks if Seraphina actually believes the accident story, to which she firmly replies that she does not. Determination hardens Seraphina's features as she vows to find the culprit tomorrow, before this escalates into a major scandal. A quick click sounds as Ivy finally enters the safety of her dormitory, peeking inside with a weary heart. Sounds Ivy's relieved sigh as she reflects on the long day, looking forward to a bath and rest. A shimmering magical flash illuminates the room, revealing a plate of food that has appeared out of thin air. Ivy finds a fresh sandwich waiting for her,
wondering if the kind headmaster provided her with a late-night meal. A portrait of a young girl with light blue hair and purple eyes smiles softly from within a floral border. The next morning, the sun rises over the grand, steeple-topped towers of the prestigious Gifted Academy. At breakfast, Luska complains about his total exhaustion, blaming Arcel for their reckless late-night mission into the palace. Tusk sounds Luska's annoyance as Arcel calmly retorts that Luska's own playfulness is why he is so tired. Nearby, the three girls responsible for trapping Ivy whisper frantically, terrified that the commoner will snitch on their actions. The girls jump in total shock when Arcel suddenly appears behind them with a polite but chilling morning greeting. Holding his breakfast tray, the black-haired boy stands before the startled trio with an unreadable, calm expression. Looking pale and nervous, the girls quickly invite Arcel to join them at the table, hiding their sudden panic. Arcel begins a casual conversation about yesterday's commotion, watching the girls' reactions with a sharp, observant eye. Arcel notes that the headmaster's personal involvement in the search means the incident will not be forgotten easily. The girls freeze in absolute terror as Arcel mentions that such a serious violation could lead directly to expulsion. Crossing his arms confidently, Arcel claims he wants to help the girls in any way possible during the investigation. A heavy silence falls over the table as the guilty girls stare down at their food, unable to speak. Setting a clever trap, Arcel solemnly swears on his family name to protect them if they tell the truth. Arcel approaches the table with a pleasant greeting, while Luska watches and calls his friend a two-faced snake. Wah, sounds the reddish-pink-haired girl's cry as she admits they were the ones who locked Ivy away. Huljuk sounds the dark-haired girl's weeping as she claims they were tricked into the plan by Lamora. Trembling with regret, the girl continues to sob, insisting they didn't really mean to trap Ivy in the room. The girls explain that Lamora only intended to scare Ivy for a moment and promised to release her quickly. Arcel lets out a heavy sigh as the girls confess they were too terrified to come forward earlier. Crying hysterically, the dark-haired girl begs Arcel to keep their confession a secret and not tell anyone else. Arcel reassures her, promising on his family's name that he will help and protect them from trouble. Arcel's eyes turn cold as he notes their lack of remorse and failure to properly apologize to Ivy. Swa sounds the tension as Arcel tells the group there is nothing more he can do for them. Jobok sounds their footsteps as Arcel and Luska walk away, leaving the sobbing girls behind in the hall. Luska asks if he has identified the culprit, and Arcel confirms it is indeed the girl he suspected. Luska wonders what Arcel plans to do next, causing the black-haired boy to stop in his tracks. Arcel looks back with a chilling gaze, stating that he will return the favor to the ringleader kindly. Nearby, the brown-haired Lamora laughs heartily while chatting with her friends, completely unaware of the looming consequences. Ha-ha sounds the group's laughter as Lamora and her friends enjoy tea and desserts at a table. Lamora is startled as Arcel suddenly calls her name, interrupting her joyful moment with her classmates. Hum-chit sounds Lamora's surprise as Arcel politely asks if they can speak privately for a few moments. Lamora's friends whisper amongst themselves, wondering if she and Arcel are secretly closer than they appear. Sujup sounds Lamora's blushing reaction as she flatteredly agrees to step outside and speak with Arcel. Once they are alone, Lamora eagerly asks what important matter he wanted to discuss with her. Arcel claims a staff member found something she lost and offers to take her to where it's being held. Lamora is completely love-struck as Arcel smiles and insists on taking responsibility to guide her properly. Geobuk sounds their movement as Arcel leads the unsuspecting Lamora down a long, quiet corridor. Lamora finds it embarrassing to have lost something and asks Arcel if he has ever experienced something similar. Arcel gives a cold, dismissive response, his face turned away as he continues to lead her forward. Lamora is confused by the oddly cold tone in Arcel's voice, briefly wondering if it's her imagination. Arcel announces their arrival at Arcel opens the door and tells Lamora to go on in, while she politely thanks him for the help. Kung sounds the heavy door as Arcel slams it shut, leaving Lamora alone in a dark, unfamiliar room.
Panicking, Lamora bangs on the door and begs Arcel to open it, realizing she has been trapped.
Humchit sounds Lamora's fear as she realizes her current situation is exactly like the one she created for Ivy.
Arcel advises her through the door to honestly admit what she did wrong if she wants to be released.
Lamora continues to lie, shouting that Ivy going missing has nothing to do with her as she begs for belief. Arcel states that she is lying to the very end as his footsteps begin to move away. Jeobok sounds Arcel's departure as he says goodbye, ignoring Lamora's desperate screams for him to wait. Jo Young sounds the silence as Lamora huddles on the floor, terrified of being trapped forever in the dark. The brown-haired girl shivers with intense fear, realizing she is all alone in the quiet, dark room. Standing in the center of the dark hall, Lamora whimpers about not wanting to be left by herself. Kung sounds Lamora's banging as she finally confesses that she was the one who ordered Ivy to be locked in. A brilliant light illuminates the room as the door opens, leaving the sobbing Lamora squinting in total shock. Ivy Alden stands at the threshold, her expression unreadable as she faces the girl who trapped her yesterday. Lamora looks around frantically, wondering where Arcel went and why Ivy is the one standing there. Ivy stares at Lamora with a somber gaze, confirming her suspicions that the entrapment was all her doing. Sangcom sounds Lamora's aggressive move as she accuses Ivy of using Arcel to exact a petty revenge.
Lamora yells that even as commoners, she is on a completely different level of status compared to Ivy.
Huak sounds Lamora's rage as she prepares to strike Ivy, calling her an insolent girl for the confrontation. A firm hand suddenly catches Lamora's wrist, stopping her attack while she is ordered to let go. Humchit sounds Lamora's shock as she finds herself face-to-face with the stern expression of Headmistress Serafina. Headmistress Serafina looms over the terrified girl, her presence absolute as she finally intervenes in the cruel situation. Headmistress Serafina grips Lamora's arm, demanding an explanation for the confession she just overheard. Trembling, the brown-haired girl falls into a dazed silence as she realizes the weight of her earlier words. Lamora is startled by a presence, looking back to see Ivy standing silently in the doorway watching her. Tears well in Lamora's purple eyes as she admits she was driven by a momentary lapse of jealousy. Ivy watches stoically while the crying girl claims she only intended to play a small, harmless trick. Desperate for mercy, Lamora clutches Ivy's hands and swears she will never act so cruelly ever again. A heavy silence follows as Ivy gazes down at her hands, absorbed in her own private, somber thoughts. Tack sounds as Ivy pulls away, her expression hardening while she looks at the girl who trapped her. Ivy reflects on the danger, noting that without the headmistress's help, the consequences could have been far worse. Headmistress Serafina is surprised by Ivy's resilience, noting the lack of any tear marks on the child's face. She observes that most children would be hysterical, yet Ivy remains remarkably calm after such a terrifying ordeal. Ivy stands firm, stating that doing nothing when one knows better makes the act more than a mistake. With a chilling finality, Ivy declares she will not forgive Lamora, leaving the brown-haired girl absolutely stunned. A loud clap rings out as Headmistress Serafina prepares to hand down the punishment for the incident. Serafina looms over the cowering Lamora, announcing that the time for her to face consequences has finally arrived.
Serafina dictates the terms. Lamora must offer a sincere apology to Ivy every single day until she's forgiven.
Lamora is aghast at the unusual punishment, while the green-haired headmistress smiles with a cold, knowing gaze. Refusing the order, Lamora begs for demerits instead, but Serafina warns that any refusal will increase her penalty. Tak sounds the floor as the terrified girl suddenly bolts away, fleeing from the room in a panic.
Serafina watches her go with a sigh, disappointed that Lamora chose to run rather than face her guilt.
Arcel watches from the doorway, noting Ivy's request to keep the incident hidden from the other academy students. Turning to Arcel, Ivy confirms her desire for secrecy, her expression soft yet determined as they speak privately. Ivy stands alone, framed by white flowers, reflecting on her decisions and the complex situation with her peers. Back in the bustling dining hall, Ivy feels the weight of dozens of curious stares from her fellow students. Blushing under the attention, Ivy struggles with the uncomfortable whispers and seeks a way to escape the crowd. She decides to quickly gather her belongings and move to a quiet corner to eat in peace. As Ivy reaches for a sandwich, she is surprised by another hand, causing a sudden, awkward moment. Looking up, Ivy is shocked to find Lamora standing right beside her at the food basket. Ivy wonders if an apology is coming, but Lamora simply turns away with a cold and dismissive glare. Ivy watches the girl leave, her brow furrowed in confusion as the silent, tense encounter finally ends.
Phew, sounds Ivy's sigh of relief as she realizes Lamora is still struggling to overcome her own pride.
Feeling isolated by the persistent gazes, Ivy prepares to eat when an unexpected voice asks to join her. Ivy looks up with a start.
A soft gasp escapes her lips as she recognizes the beautiful student standing right in front of her.
Lady Irene, the silver-haired girl with purple eyes, offers a polite greeting to the surprised blonde girl. Irene explains her desire to spend time together, noting that as roommates, they haven't spoken much yet. Ivy panics and shouts her agreement, her voice echoing loudly through the room in a moment of embarrassment. Blushing furiously, Ivy apologizes for her outburst, while Irene watches her with a calm and curious expression. Ivy is overcome with joy at the chance to talk with Lady Irene, struggling to hide her excitement. Irene watches Ivy eat with a warm, gentle smile, enjoying the sweet and earnest nature of her roommate. Surrounded by hearts, Irene thinks about how precious Ivy is, finding her small blonde companion absolutely adorable. The scene shifts to the Academy's admission day, showing the grand buildings bathed in a warm evening glow. Students whisper about Lady Irene's status, wondering who would be lucky enough to be assigned as her roommate. Upon entering the dormitory, Irene is pleased to find the living quarters as luxurious as expected of the palace. Irene explores the room, hoping to find a good view of the garden from her new living space.
Her eyes widen as she spots a tiny white dress hanging on the wall, shining with soft light.
A cry of total shock escapes Irene as she stares at the miniature outfit in complete disbelief. Irene blushes and covers her mouth. Narration notes that Irene was raised in the southern region, where people are known for their unusually large size. The difference is significant, as southern people are described as being considerably larger than those from other regions. Irene stands with a cold gaze while other girls admire her mature, grown-up presence at the academy. Flashback narration explains that Southerners from Irene's home region have a legendary weakness for doting on small children. A memory of Irene's grand home surfaces alongside an angry shout about her sending a boy to the hospital. In a flashback, Irene's sister scolds her for physically attacking a boy, while their father reels in dramatic shock. Clenching her fists, Irene defiantly explains she punished the boy because he dared to lift her skirt. Irene's father is appalled by her violence, but her sister surprisingly supports Irene's decision to punish the brute. Irene sits on the couch looking confused as her family members stand over her, discussing the violent incident. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quiet whisper sounding as her family plots to ensure the bully never returns. Irene's father and sister give a triumphant thumbs up, having decided to handle the boy's punishment themselves. Her father notes that Irene has been causing more trouble lately, making the local people afraid of her. Suggesting a change of environment, Irene's father presents her with a new document to read after their family discussion. Her attention is taken by a sudden, heavy thud sounding as Irene realizes she is holding an academy acceptance letter. Irene's sister excitedly reveals that she applied on Irene's behalf, much to the young girl's shock and betrayal. Her sister calmly explains that although Irene is perfect, she needs to find friends and build social connections. Irene looks skeptical as she realizes the real goal is to expand the Terran's family network in the capital. Her sister dismisses her doubts, laughing that entering the academy is a profitable move that kills two birds. Irene is reminded that at 10 years old, she must start acting like a proper member of the Terrans. A visual path depicts the calculated, status-based life Irene must follow to clear rumors about her becoming princess. Irene scoffs at the stifling role of a crown princess, frustrated that rumors spread after just one social party. Back in the present, Irene is excited to meet her roommate, but hears other students mocking the girl's clothes. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp creak sounding as Irene prepares to silence the girls mocking her roommate. Ivy enters the room, her golden hair and bright green eyes surrounded by a soft, sparkling floral aura. Irene is immediately captivated by Ivy's appearance, finding the small girl to be incredibly adorable from her perspective. Irene notes how young Ivy looks, her inner monologue showing a mix of surprise and immediate fascination with her. Ivy introduces herself politely, but Irene's thoughts are filled with hearts and stars at Ivy's tiny and cute nature. Irene struggles to maintain a neutral expression while her inner self is screaming with joy over Ivy's precious name. Upon closer inspection of Ivy's hands, Irene worries that her thin frame and dry hair indicate past neglect. Irene bluntly asks Ivy if she was starved at the poorhouse, her concern sounding like a harsh, noble accusation. Ivy is deeply moved by Irene's words, finding her blunt concern to be truly kind and wonderful in reality. Irene's attention is taken by a sudden, loud shout sounding as she scolds Ivy for her perceived lack of manners. Other girls demand Ivy apologize to Lady Irene, completely misunderstanding Irene's intentions and creating a tense scene. Overwhelmed by the situation, Irene hurriedly requests to step outside to escape the stifling social pressure of the academy. The noble girls offer to guide Irene, while Ivy watches from a distance, amazed by the academy's massive scale. Her attention is taken by a sudden rhythmic tap sounding as Ivy and Irene walk together in awkward silence. Irene regrets never explaining herself properly after Ivy went missing during the tour the very next morning. Irene blames herself for not paying enough attention to Ivy, fearing her coldness will prevent her from making friends. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Irene tentatively calls Ivy's name during breakfast. Irene formally offers an apology to the confused Ivy, who doesn't understand why the noble girl is apologizing. Irene admits she was wrong to judge based on rumors, her face flushing as she tries to make amends. Ivy listens as Irene explains her regret, the silver-haired girl looking down as she sincerely asks for forgiveness. Thinking of her past experiences with pity, Ivy explains that people always felt bad for her poorhouse origins. Irene worries that her earlier words deeply hurt Ivy's feelings, fearing that she might never be forgiven for them. Ivy's face lights up with a radiant smile, warmly thanking Lady Irene for her heartfelt and sincere apology. Irene is stunned by Ivy's bright reaction, her purple eyes widening as the golden girl says her name. Her attention is taken by a sudden, light giggle, sounding as the two girls finally share a friendly meal. Ivy learns that Irene hurriedly inquired about her when she went missing, confirming the silver-haired girl's genuine care. Irene looks down, admitting her intense worry during the time Ivy had disappeared from the academy tour. Her attention is taken by a sudden, joyful burst sounding as Ivy laughs at Irene's unexpected and adorable honesty. Ivy watches her roommate with a soft gaze, finding Irene to be as noble as a fairy tale princess. Irene blushes as she realizes Ivy is seeing a different, more vulnerable side of her personality today. Ivy and Irene sit together at a dining table, their quiet morning conversation beginning peacefully. Irene reflects on past events while an unexpected voice from off-screen calls out Ivy's name. The red-haired Lord Luska arrives, offering a greeting that earns an immediate, icy glare from Irene. Luska suggests joining the girls, and a reluctant Arcel agrees to sit down for breakfast with them. Arcel greets Ivy warmly, leaving Irene to cross her arms. Luska mentions Irene's noble family background, but casually forgets her name, further testing the silver-haired girl's patience. A dark aura surrounds Irene as she sharply questions if formal introductions are truly necessary for them. The four students settle in, with Luska chatting away while Irene remains visibly grumpy about the company. Nearby students whisper among themselves, noticing the unusual group of high-status nobles and a commoner eating together. In a series of sweet moments, Irene invites Ivy to drop formalities and simply call her Irene. Back in their room at night, the roommates discuss the upcoming challenge of course registration for the term. Ivy is stunned to learn that Irene's family handled her registration, leaving the silver-haired girl with little choice. Feeling overwhelmed, Ivy panics over the process while Irene reassures her that choosing professors is the only worry. Ivy's radiant smile returns as she promises to tell Irene about any fun and interesting classes she finds. The next day begins at the Grand Academy, marked by the bright morning sun and the sound of birds. Ivy hunches over her desk, clutching her head in total despair as she faces the mountain of registration paperwork. She stares at the complicated forms, realizing how many difficult decisions are required just to take one single class. Concepts like imperial philosophy and ancient languages tempt Ivy as she tries to narrow down her academic interests. Ivy worries that focusing only on career-driven subjects might disappoint the headmaster, fueling her internal conflict. She finally reaches a compromise, deciding to balance 3 personal interest classes with 3 practical, money-making ones. With most of the schedule settled, Ivy looks at the remaining mandatory subject with a look of pure determination. She examines the math registration sheet, overwhelmed by the sheer number of professors available for the required course. A sudden, sharp dang sounds the bell, startling Ivy as she stares at her unfinished paperwork in surprise. Running out of time, Ivy abandons her desk and decides to leave the final math decision for later. A teacher announces the end of the day's schedule, reminding all students to prepare well for their registration. Lamora sits alone at a cafeteria table, feeling pathetic as she notices her former social circle now avoids her. Her gaze wanders through the hall until she spots the lively group gathered around a central table. Ivy is surrounded by her 3 high-ranking friends, their loud and cheerful bickering drawing everyone's envious attention. Looking at her new companions, Ivy's heart swells with genuine happiness at the warmth of their friendship. Lamora's jealousy boils over as she watches Ivy, feeling resentful that she is the one suffering while Ivy flourishes. The brown-haired girl's thoughts turn dark, finding it illogical for a commoner from an orphanage to act so important. Clenching her teeth, Lamora resolves to take action and fix her standing by any means necessary. She decides to stalk Ivy, hoping to uncover a fatal weakness she can use to destroy the girl's reputation. Lamora imagines catching Ivy. Her grand plan involves silence. In the hallway, 2 mean-spirited Watching from the shadows, Lamora hears the bullies call Ivy an unsightly orphan who should be treated like a maid. Ivy stands silently, her expression pained as she endures the bullying, which Lamora realizes has likely happened daily. Lamora scoffs at Ivy's silence, thinking the blonde girl is stupid for not reporting the harassment to her friends. Turning away, Lamora tries to convince herself she doesn't care, despite her visible discomfort with the cruel scene. The bullies snatch Ivy's bag, mocking its small size and the fact that it only contains boring textbooks. The brown-haired bully smirks as Ivy begs for her belongings back, clearly enjoying the small girl's distress. A flashback reveals Lamora's own struggles with status, her fists clenching at the memory of being called an insolent brat. The bullying intensifies until a sharp voice calls out Ivy's name, cutting through the tense atmosphere of the room. Lamora steps into the light, placing herself between the terrified Ivy and the two stunned bullies. With a cold and threatening gaze, Lamora announces she has been searching for Ivy and demands an explanation. The two girls recoil in fear, their arrogance vanishing instantly at the sight of the confrontational Lamora. Lamora pointedly asks if they were bullying Lady Irene's roommate, forcing the girls to stammer out a frantic denial. With a rough shove, Lamora returns the bag, lying that Ivy simply dropped it to cover for the interaction. The bullies flee as Lamora huffs in annoyance, leaving a stunned Ivy clutching her bag in total disbelief. Ivy offers a warm, sincere thanks to Lamora for stepping in and helping her earlier. Turning away with a blush, Lamora dismisses the gratitude by calling Ivy's behavior absolutely pathetic. Lamora explodes in frustration, scolding Ivy for remaining passive while the nobles look down on her. Ivy recalls a painful memory of being targeted by mean children who threw stones at her. Lamora walks away, warning Ivy that her weak reputation reflects poorly on every other commoner student. A lingering silence follows as Lamora exits through the doorway, leaving Ivy alone with her thoughts. Clenching her bag, the blonde girl watches Lamora leave with a hopeful and gentle expression. Ivy feels a surge of relief, believing that her relationship with Lamora might finally be improving. Suddenly remembering her academic duties, Ivy turns her attention toward the pending course registration documents. Ivy pauses in deep thought, struggling to select the right math professor for the upcoming term. With focused intent, Ivy fills out her registration forms, hoping she has chosen the right path. Approaching the desk, Ivy officially submits her completed registration paperwork to the Academy staff member. Other students walk past, complaining about the difficulty of math being a mandatory subject this year. The staff member instructs the students to double-check their names before depositing forms into the drawer. A short-haired girl freezes in shock after glancing at a name on one of the submitted forms. Rumors spread instantly as students gossip about the fearless person who signed up for Professor Malleus. An aura of dread surrounds the image of Professor Malleus, a man known for his eccentric personality. Dismissing the news as a mistake, a student assumes no one would intentionally take such a class. A bright sun rises over the gifted academy, marking the official start of the first school day. Excited chatter fills the air as students discuss their chosen subjects while walking to their first classes. Her heart thumping with nervous anticipation, Ivy prepares herself for the academic journey that lies ahead. Radiating joy, Ivy skips through the academy courtyard, eager to attend her favorite subject's first session. Ivy enters a hallway, feeling incredibly optimistic about starting the day with a class she truly loves. Bubbling with curiosity, the tiny blonde girl imagines all the insightful questions she will ask her professor. Checking her map, Ivy realizes East Hall 23 is located at the very edge of the grounds. Ivy finally arrives at the remote location, looking up at the building with a sense of wonder. The atmosphere shifts as Ivy notices how old and neglected the building looks compared to the others. Ivy cautiously steps inside, startled by the creepy interior and the thick cobwebs covering the walls. Taking a deep breath, the blonde girl psychs herself up and throws open the classroom door.
An eerie silence greets Ivy as she finds herself standing alone in a dark, empty classroom.
Confusion sets in as Ivy wonders if she has accidentally wandered into the wrong room.
Her eyes widen as she notices a large amount of writing left on the dusty chalkboard.
The board presents a daunting prerequisite. Anyone attending must solve 500 advanced math problems immediately.
Clutching her clothes, Ivy is horrified by the impossible task set for the very next class session.
Determination replaces her shock as Ivy resolves to meet the high standards expected of an academy student.
Surrounded by a comical fire of passion, Ivy vows to finish the assignment no matter what. The scene shifts back to the bustling academy exterior as classes finally let out for the day.
A group of girls flees in terror, leaving one student to bump into a tall, imposing figure.
Rubbing her bruised forehead, the student looks up in fear at the person she just ran into.
Professor Malleus looms over the girl, his sharp features set in a look of pure disdain.
The students scream and scatter at the mere sight of the terrifying math professor in the hallway. Tisking in annoyance, Malleus scoffs at the ill-mannered brats who lack proper etiquette and academic skill. He reflects on his reputation, tired of students who freak out instead of focusing on their studies. Malleus enters the classroom, demanding to see the fearless fool who dared to sign up for him. Jumping to her feet, Ivy politely greets the professor, startling him with her unexpected presence. With a sudden, quick tap sounding, Malleus slams his book down and labels Ivy a bothersome brat. With a stern gaze, the professor asks if she completed the 500 problem prerequisite he left on the board. Ivy hesitates, her hands trembling as she admits she spent a lot of effort on the assignment. Looking dejected, she confesses that she couldn't solve a few problems she didn't fully understand yet.
A smug smirk crosses the professor's face, as if her struggle confirms his low opinion of students.
Professor Malleus dismisses class, telling the stunned Ivy she is unqualified for failing to finish the initial assignment. As the gray-haired professor walks away, Ivy desperately calls out to him, begging for just a moment of his time.
Clutching her textbook, the blonde girl pleads with the retreating professor to help her with a single math problem.
Malleus remains firm, claiming he is a busy man, while Ivy dejectedly asks if her request is truly too much. Looking up with shimmering eyes, Ivy explains that she specifically wanted to learn from him, showing her genuine academic interest. A sudden, sharp yes sounds as Ivy realizes she must be more assertive to get the help she needs. Ivy opens her book, pointing out a specific formula she couldn't grasp through independent study, hoping the professor will explain.
Professor Malleus pauses to examine the book as Ivy continues to explain exactly where her understanding faltered in the process.
The professor is internally stunned, realizing Ivy's handwritten solutions are clean enough to be published in a formal textbook.
A sudden, quick tap sounds as Malleus is jolted from his thoughts, prompting a confused Ivy to call his name. Malleus questions why she struggled with one problem when she solved the rest perfectly, leaving Ivy confused by his logic. Frustration boils over as the professor gestures wildly, insisting that both problems rely on the exact same underlying mathematical formula. With a sudden, quick drag sounding, the professor grabs a chair, his patience wearing thin with the frustrating little girl. Malleus commands Ivy to sit, resolving to personally explain her careless mistake and clarify the complex mathematical concept. With a sudden, quick scritch sounding, the professor prepares to write, tisking at how easily Ivy fell for his trick question. Tapping the chalkboard, Malleus begins a detailed lecture, guiding Ivy on how to properly interpret and organize the difficult formula. A sudden, sharp tap sounds as Malleus finishes the derivation on the board, proving that the solution is actually quite simple.
Ivy beams with joy, her eyes sparkling as she expresses her amazement at how easily the professor solved the daunting problem. Feeling flustered by the praise, the professor dismisses the fuss while Ivy enthusiastically vows to finish the remaining problems herself. With a subtle tick-tock sounding, Malleus begrudgingly admits that Ivy might not be a complete fool after all. Noticing the late hour, the professor realizes their impromptu tutoring session has lasted much longer than he had originally intended. Radiating happiness, Ivy offers her sincere thanks and apologizes for taking up so much of the professor's valuable time. Ivy bows and runs off to drop the course, leaving the gray-haired professor standing alone in total silence and shock. Stopping her in her tracks, Malleus tells the blonde girl to forget about dropping the course, leaving her utterly baffled. The professor walks away, instructing a surprised Ivy to be prepared for the real lessons starting in their next session. A sudden, loud slam sounds as the heavy doors close, with Malleus announcing his final departure for the day. Her heart filled with excitement, Ivy realizes with joy that the terrifying professor has officially accepted her as his student. The sun shines over the academy, signaling the arrival of the next scheduled class day for the aspiring young scholars. Walking through the halls, Malleus questions his rash decision to keep Ivy, despite his efforts to make the class difficult. Reaching for the door, the professor prepares to convince Ivy to drop the class before the registration period officially ends. The classroom is suddenly filled with a brilliant light, revealing that the previously dusty and neglected room is now spotless. Ivy greets the professor with a cheerful morning salute, her face glowing with poignancy as she stands in the cleaned room. Stunned, Malleus asks if she cleaned the entire classroom alone, to which Ivy explains she couldn't study in the dust. The professor stares in silence as Ivy confidently brags about her cleaning skills, leaving him completely at a loss for words. Malleus is deeply impressed by the blonde girl's passion, especially after she explains how she carefully moved the spiders outside. A sudden, soft thud sounds as the professor places a hand on Ivy's head, surprising the young girl with the gesture. Blushing slightly, Malleus tells Ivy that cleaning is no longer necessary, though his stern expression remains as he gives the order. Ivy salutes the professor with a wide grin, eager to finally begin the day's academic lessons in her new environment. A sudden, quick tap sounds as Malleus returns to the board, eager to introduce a brand new mathematical formula. During the lecture, Ivy raises her hand with enthusiasm, showing her sharp mind as she engages with the complex material. A sudden, sharp clap sounds as Ivy high-fives the professor's hand, celebrating a successful breakthrough in their rigorous study session. A sudden, resonant dang sounds the bell, marking the end of the lesson as Ivy thanks her teacher for today. Watching Ivy wave goodbye, Malleus reflects on her sincerity, noting it's been years since he's seen such a promising student. As Ivy runs off, the professor realizes that beneath her kindness lies a truly formidable and rare mathematical talent. Clenching his fists in excitement, Malleus acknowledges that teaching Ivy is the most rewarding experience of his long academic career. He marvels at her genius-level growth, determined to find a way to help her reach her full potential as a mathematician. A sudden, loud thud sounds as Malleus strikes a table, remembering a woman named Serafina Rydam who might help Ivy. A sudden, soft click sounds as a woman enters, leading Malleus to chide her for using his given name on campus. Serafina Rydam looks on with a nervous expression, seemingly overwhelmed by the professor's intense and sudden summons for her. In the bustling academy cafeteria, students gather for their meals, signaling a brief moment of peace in the busy school day. The red-haired boy thanks Serafina for saving a seat, though she flatly denies doing so. Ivy eats a sandwich while studying intensely, surrounded by a comical fire of academic passion. Serafina reveals Ivy is doing Malleus's assignment, terrifying the boy who knows the professor's reputation. Ivy looks up with an innocent, wide-eyed expression as her friends discuss the frightening math professor. The red-haired boy warns that the eccentric professor gives so much homework that everyone's grades drop. The black-haired boy advises Ivy to reconsider, noting that Malleus provides no academic support or recommendations. Ivy smiles brightly, explaining that the professor's clear explanations actually make studying advanced math fun. Her friends are stunned that she is already tackling advanced curriculum and finds the professor kind. Looking at the material, the black-haired boy reflects on the harsh curriculum and the professor's intentions. A sudden realization strikes the black-haired boy that Ivy might be trying to surpass everyone else. Regret fills the boy as he realizes he shouldn't have avoided the class based on rumors. The black-haired boy declares his intent to join the class, shocking the red-haired student beside him. As the boys argue about their schedules, a confused Ivy wonders why they are both so agitated. Serafina watches the group with a stern expression, clearly unsettled by the shift in the group's dynamic. Fearing the others will bond without her, Serafina resolves to join the difficult math class as well. Serafina makes a quick excuse about her current professor's teaching style to justify joining her friends. Ivy is overjoyed, her face lighting up at the thought of all four taking class together. While Ivy offers to lead the way, the others burn with competitive energy to keep up. Malleus walks through the academy, happily planning to reduce Ivy's homework to help her avoid exhaustion. Approaching the door, the professor expects to see his praiseworthy Ivy waiting for him inside the classroom. Malleus stops mid-gesture as he hears other students inside trying to convince Ivy to drop his class. Panic and rage fill the professor as he reacts to the perceived attempt to steal his star pupil. A sudden, loud crash sounds as Malleus bursts inside, demanding to know who these punks are. Ivy greets him cheerfully, but the professor's expression darkens immediately at the sight of the newcomers. Malleus glares at the rascals, offended they would try to lure Ivy away to a different professor. The boys complain about the classroom's distance, but Malleus remains firm about the academy's layout. Serafina stands up aggressively to interrupt Malleus, determined to list Ivy's struggles under his current regime. Serafina accuses the professor of making Ivy miss breakfast because the classroom is far too remote. Pointing at Ivy's face, Serafina claims the massive homework load is giving the tiny child dark circles. The boys add that Ivy even bruised her knee running, leaving the professor feeling surprisingly guilty. Malleus stammers that he was already planning to move to a closer room to keep Ivy satisfied. Serafina remains confused, explaining that they have already submitted formal applications to join his class. The professor remains skeptical, questioning if the three new students can truly keep up with advanced math. Standing with resolve, the three students declare their confidence in their ability to handle the course. Finding the situation annoying, Malleus decides to give the newcomers a difficult math problem as a test. He declares solving the problem is their only ticket into the class, leaving Serafina looking quite shocked. The professor sets a high standard, while the red-haired boy breaks into a panicked sweat. A sudden, resonant boom sounds as Malleus slams the table, announcing a strict 15-minute time limit. Ivy watches with concern, recognizing that the challenge is far trickier than anything they have studied. A sudden, rhythmic scritch sounding fills the room as the students work through the first 2 minutes. The black-haired boy stands up almost immediately to submit his answer, shocking his fellow students. Malleus is deeply impressed by the perfect solution, acknowledging the boy's talent as Duke Kalen's son. The boy bows respectfully as the professor grants him a pass to join the advanced class. 8 minutes have elapsed as Serafina and the red-haired boy continue to work intensely on their papers. The red-haired boy shouts in triumph as he solves the problem, startling the focused Serafina beside him. With a sudden, soft gulp sounding, Malleus takes the paper and examines it silently while the boy waits. Stunned, the professor questions how the boy managed to arrive at such an unconventional mathematical conclusion. Malleus questions the use of Tarsal's formula, which the boy admits he just guessed based on intuition.
The professor reflects on whether the boy is lucky or a genius for finding a new formula. Malleus gives his approval for now, and the red-haired boy cheers wildly with a happy Ivy.
Ivy stares wide-eyed at the clock, her heart pounding as less than 5 minutes remain for the test. Composed and silent, Irene works diligently on her paper, sketching geometric shapes with focused intensity. Ivy watches Irene in awe, amazed that her friend can remain so calm under such immense academic pressure.
Despite her external calm, a sudden, soft bead of sweat drips down Irene's neck, betraying her hidden anxiety.
Panic consumes Irene internally as she clutches her head, desperately wondering how on earth to solve the impossible problem.
Professor Malleus looks deeply annoyed as he reminds Serafina Rydam not to use his given name on academy grounds.
Sipping his tea, the professor expresses his sudden interest in learning more about the talented student Ivy Alden. Malleus enthusiastically declares his plan to become Ivy's guardian, believing she is destined for mathematical greatness. Serafina stands abruptly, sweating as she reveals that Ivy already has a guardian, igniting the professor's competitive rage. Pointing aggressively, Malleus shouts that he is the Empire's greatest mathematician and far superior to any other guardian. Serafina pushes the shouting professor toward the exit, insisting she is too busy to provide him with Ivy's address. A sudden loud slam sounds as Serafina shuts the door, ignoring Malleus's indignant complaints about her upbringing. Leaning against the door, Serafina exhales a weary sigh of relief after finally managing to eject the eccentric professor. The sun bathes the Grand Academy towers in light, shifting the scene to a moment of quiet focus elsewhere. A sudden rhythmic scritch sounding fills the air as a golden pen moves rapidly across a sheet of parchment. Addressing the figure with respect, a man bows and speaks to the blonde-haired majesty seated at his desk. The blonde-haired man examines a document with a serious expression, his mind occupied by matters of state. In a light-hearted moment, the Chibi Emperor notes the absence of bugs lately, receiving praise for his effective measures. Back in the classroom, Irene stares at the clock with 3 minutes left, struggling to stay calm and find a solution.
Irene remembers her former teacher at the blackboard, searching for the guidance she needs to solve the problem. As a younger student, young Irene raises her hand to ask for help when she cannot identify the problem. Her teacher explains that she knows every formula, though young Irene admits she often confuses which one to apply. Adjusting her glasses, the teacher tells young Irene that choosing the correct formula is where her true skill lies. Young Irene suggests a wildly inefficient method of testing every formula, which her skeptical teacher surprisingly acknowledges. A sudden, sharp realization strikes Irene as she remembers her teacher's words about her knowledge of basic formulas. Determined to succeed, Irene resolves to try every possible formula rather than sitting in silence and failing. A sudden, rapid scritch sounding fills the room as Irene writes at insane speed, leaving her friends completely stunned. Working through the final minute, Irene frantically discards one formula after another in her search for the answer. Her eyes narrow as she realizes there is only one formula left that could possibly solve the complex problem. A sudden, resonant thud sounds as Irene's movements startle Ivy and the boys as time finally runs out. Malleus stands silently as he reviews Irene's work, while the young girl waits with a focused, serious expression. A soft glow surrounds Irene as she offers a bright, confident smile, hopeful that her brute force method worked. A sudden, joyous cheer sounds as the students celebrate, while the professor acknowledges Irene's supernatural performance. Looking back at the paper, Malleus prepares to comment on the unconventional method the young girl employed. He marvels at the page covered in complex equations, noting that her brute force approach was incredibly inefficient. Malleus realizes Irene's success is due to her absurdly fast mind, marking her as a true talent.
The professor announces that everyone may join his class, though he prepares to set one final strict condition.
Looking utterly drained, Malleus begs the students to promise they won't bring any more people into his class. Irene and the boys stand together with newfound confidence, while a confused Ivy watches her friend's competitive energy. A sudden, resonant dang sounds as the academy bell tolls, ending the session as Arcel thanks the professor. A sudden, sharp thap sounds as the red-haired boy slams his hand down, complaining that something feels wrong. Arcel questions his friend's sudden distress, pointing out that they all passed the difficult entrance exam perfectly fine. The red-haired boy yells in frustration about the massive pile of homework, while Irene and Ivy try to focus. A sudden, sharp snap sounds as Irene loses her patience with the boy's insults regarding her academic abilities. Irene grabs the red-haired boy in a fit of rage, while Ivy continues to study peacefully, ignoring the chaos. A sudden, calm sigh sounds as Arcel announces he has finished all of his daunting homework. Irene and the red-haired boy are left in total shock, staring at Arcel, who completed the work so quickly. Feeling defeated, Irene trembles as Arcel attributes his speed to the professor's exceptionally clear and kind teaching style. Ivy sits caught in the middle of her friend's intense academic rivalry, feeling completely overwhelmed by the chaotic atmosphere. The red-haired boy laughs heartily and suggests they go eat, bringing a moment of much-needed relief to the group. A sudden, rhythmic hum sounding fills the crowded cafeteria as Ivy and her friends look for a seat. Irene asks Ivy if she has decided what to eat, prompting the young girl to settle on a sandwich. Noticing a pattern, Irene questions why Ivy always chooses sandwiches, prompting a curious glance from the silver-haired girl. Ivy stammers and blushes, her hesitation highlighted by a sudden, soft flutter sounding as she searches for an answer. Admitting she only knows sandwiches, Ivy watches as Arcel and Ruska arrive with trays full of diverse foods. Sparkles fill Ivy's eyes as she marvels at the delicious-looking dishes the boys have brought to the table. Curious about the new flavors, Ivy asks the boys what their dishes are called, considering trying them herself. Irene encourages exploration, expressing her own curiosity about the menu, while Ivy leans in to listen intently. With a determined chibi expression, Irene suggests they simply order one of every item on the cafeteria's menu. Ivy panics about potential leftovers and demerits, but Irene dismisses her worries by noting the limited menu size. Irene confidently declares that the boys will easily finish any extra food, leaving Ruska looking quite surprised. Ruska and Arcel look utterly defeated, realizing they have once again been outsmarted by Irene's bold logic. A sudden, bright shimmer sounding accompanies the arrival of a massive feast containing all the cafeteria's top recommendations. The group gathers around the loaded table as Irene asks Ivy which gourmet dish she wants to try first. Each friend recommends a different specialty, from hearty stew to lamb steak, leaving Ivy completely spoiled for choice. Ivy stares at the spread with wide eyes, her heart beating fast as she tries to decide where to start. Choosing a dish, Ivy prepares to take her first bite while her friends watch with encouraging smiles and laughter. A sudden, sharp realization strikes Ivy as she experiences the incredible flavor, her expression shifting to one of shock. Ivy digs in with enthusiasm, her movements followed by a sudden, soft gulp sounding as Irene watches her friend. Overwhelmed by the delicious taste, Ivy exclaims that it is the best thing she has ever eaten in her life. Irene smiles warmly, glad the food suits Ivy's taste, but warns her to eat slowly to avoid a stomachache. Taking a brief pause, Ivy glances sideways as she notices the boys' intense focus on their own meals. Ruska continues to eat heartily, his focus entirely on the savory sausage held on his fork. Irene attempts to teach the boys a lesson, but Ruska complains about the unfairness of the current situation. Ruska points out that Arsel has already finished 4 whole plates, leaving the girls looking completely stunned. Composed as ever, Arsel wipes his mouth with a napkin, having finished his meal with incredible speed and efficiency. Ivy and Irene stare in disbelief, unable to fathom how the boys can consume such massive amounts of food. A sudden, rapid munch sounding fills the air as the boys continue to polish off plate after plate together. The girls watch in awe as the boys finish 8 full servings in mere seconds, leaving nothing behind. Ruska stands up to order even more food, much to the shock of the girls who are already full. Ruska mentions an invitation to lunch from the Duke's children, turning to Arsel to confirm his attendance. Arsel remains silent for a moment, his blue eyes fixed on Ruska as he considers the upcoming social invitation. To Ruska's immense shock, Arsel refuses the invitation, choosing instead to stay and have lunch with Ivy. Feeling abandoned, Ruska yells at his friend for ditching him after previously encouraging him to socialize more. Ruska complains that Arsel is suddenly choosing someone else over him, much to the black-haired boy's annoyance. Softening his tone, Ruska admits he might actually understand the reason behind Arsel's sudden interest in Ivy. Ruska challenges Arsel to think about who Ivy reminds him of, hinting at a hidden connection or resemblance. Arsel looks confused, questioning the sudden change in topic as Ruska prepares to order more dessert. Reflecting on his past, Arsel realizes he has never associated Ivy with anyone else, despite Ruska's pointed suggestions. In the background, Irene and Ivy continue their cheerful conversation, oblivious to the boys' deeper conversation. The scene shifts to the past as a golden light surrounds a memory of a peaceful day outdoors. A young girl with long blonde hair laughs joyfully, her image mirroring the happiness of the current Ivy. A red-haired woman offers a bright, kind smile, her presence filling the memory with a sense of warmth. Addressing the young boys, the woman asks if they are the children her friend Chloe mentioned earlier. Young Arsel and Ruska look up in surprise as they encounter the mysterious woman in the sun-drenched woods. The red-haired woman invites them to come along and pick apples, her friendly demeanor easing their initial hesitation. A sudden, rhythmic clip sounding follows a carriage as it travels through the forest toward a grand wedding. Inside the carriage, a man explains the importance of the event, encouraging his son to embrace the experience. A label introduces 5-year-old Arsel Kieran, showing him sitting neatly in the moving carriage. The young boy promises to endure any tiredness, earning praise from his father for upholding the family's standards. Arsel nods obediently while informing his father that everything has been proceeding without any major issues. Duke Kieran advises his son to maintain a peaceful relationship with Ruska and continue getting along well. Arsel looks to the side with a skeptical expression, clearly doubting his father's request about his peer. A sudden, tired sigh sounding occurs as Arsel imagines the immature Ruska chasing bugs while he waits nearby. Determined to handle the situation himself, the dark-haired boy decides he will simply have to take the lead. Arsel prepares to ask his father a question as they travel together inside the ornate, moving carriage. Arsel leans in and mentions he heard rumors regarding the woman set to marry the crown prince. The boy asks if the unsettling rumor about the woman being a witch is actually true. Duke Kieran is caught off guard by the blunt question, his expression turning slightly awkward and uncertain. The carriage finally arrives at their destination, interrupting their brief conversation about the rumors and the wedding. After they exit, the Duke suggests Arsel take a walk while official preparations for their visit get underway. Duke Kieran greets an unseen individual, apologizing for their late arrival and inquiring about the current progress. Arsel is startled to see Ruska suddenly sprinting away toward the tree line at a frantic pace. Arsel catches up and asks Ruska where he is rushing off to with such urgency. Ruska excitedly explains he's going to play in the forest, leaving Arcel completely bewildered by his lack of caution. Arcel recalls a stern warning about the forest's dangers, specifically the risk of getting lost or encountering monsters. Arcel shouts warnings after Riska, but the red-haired boy ignores him and continues running deep into the woods.
Arcel chases after his friend, desperate to prevent him from getting lost in the dense and dangerous forest.
They encounter a tall, red-haired woman holding a basket, who greets them with a soft, mysterious hello. The woman asks if they are the children Cloyce mentioned, while Arcel stares at her with intense suspicion. Arcel's face pales in horror as he realizes this woman perfectly matches the unsettling rumors of the forest witch. He imagines a dark, cloaked figure conducting sinister experiments to ensnare the crown prince with forbidden evil magic. Terrified they will become test subjects, Arcel tries to decline, but Ruska joyfully accepts the woman's invitation. Ruska dismisses Arcel's fears, telling him he can stay behind alone if he is too scared to follow.
Arcel is frustrated, calling Ruska an idiot for following a suspected witch just for the sake of some apples.
Despite his fear, Arcel worries that Ruska will fall victim to dark magic if he doesn't intervene. Recalling his father's advice to get along, Arcel feels pressured to follow and protect his reckless companion. Reluctantly, Arcel decides to tail them, complaining about the unnecessary hassle Ruska has caused him today. Hiding behind a tree, Arcel vows to rescue Ruska immediately if the witch tries anything suspicious or dangerous. Arcel sprints through the woods, struggling to keep them in sight as they move deeper into the forest.
The red-haired woman chats pleasantly with the cheerful Ruska, making Arcel even more suspicious of her motives.
Panting heavily, Arcel finds it strange that his companions seem to be getting farther away despite his efforts. Arcel observes them from a distance, feeling increasingly isolated as the trail continues through the vibrant, flowered woods. While trying to keep up, Arcel suddenly trips and begins to tumble down a steep and rocky embankment. Birds flee from the nearby trees as the sound of the boy's sudden fall echoes through the quiet forest. A sudden, pained ugh sounding escapes Arcel as he lands hard on the ground, clutching his injured leg. The red-haired woman and Ruska peer over the edge, with the woman expressing immediate concern for him. The woman looks down with a serious expression, noting that Arcel appears to have sustained a fairly significant injury.
Arcel is shocked as the woman leaps down the embankment with surprising agility, landing right in front of him.
Panicked and unable to run, Arcel wonders if she is taking advantage of his injury to finally capture him. Arcel warns her to stay back, threatening to tell his father, the Duke, if she comes any closer. A sudden, sharp eek sounding escapes the boy as the woman reaches out her hands toward his injured leg.
Arcel shields his eyes as a bright, golden light suddenly emanates from the woman's outstretched hands.
The woman focuses her power, surrounding Arcel's injured leg with a swirling aura of warm, restorative healing magic. Glowing particles of light dance around his ankle as the magical energy works to mend his wounded flesh instantly. With a bright smile, the woman presents the healed leg, cheerfully announcing that he is now all better.
Arcel is speechless as he examines his leg, finding that the painful wound has completely vanished without a trace.
The boy is confused, wondering why a witch would have healing powers and what her true intentions might be. The woman tilts her head with a curious expression, asking Arcel what he just mumbled to himself. Arcel bluntly asks what she wants from him, suspecting she only healed him to gain something in return. Lillian smiles gently, informing the young boys they must speak to her father regarding their request. A sudden, sharp thwack sounding marks the moment a finger flicks young Arcel's forehead, leaving him stunned. Rubbing his forehead, the boy recoils as Lillian teases him for being just as odd as Ruska. Surrounded by blooming roses, Lillian reminds him that saying thank you is the proper response to receiving help. Arcel watches Lillian walk away, realizing that despite his efforts, he has never truly forgotten her.
Returning to the present, a sudden, sharp clink sounding startles Arcel as he sits lost in deep thought. Ivy apologizes for dropping her fork, drawing the attention of Arcel, Ruska, and Irene at the table. Arcel gazes at Ivy, troubled by the overwhelming feeling that she reminds him of his memories of Lillian.
Arcel offers to fetch a new fork for Ivy, who insists he doesn't need to trouble himself.
Determined to help, Ivy suggests joining Arcel as he heads toward the table filled with delicious dishes.
Arcel hands a new fork to the silver-haired girl, asking if she needs anything else from the buffet.
Clutching the fork, Ivy walks back with a soft blush, feeling touched by Arcel's continued kindness toward her. Ivy expresses her sincere gratitude, but Arcel simply dismisses the gesture as being nothing of any real importance. A sudden, quiet stillness fills the air as Arcel stares at Ivy, his expression unreadable and intensely focused. Ivy wonders about Arcel's kindness, prompting him to reflect on how a past day influenced his present actions. A sudden, boisterous laugh sounding echoes through the sunset-lit field as the young boys race ahead in a memory. Lillian calls out a warning to the boys, her arms carrying a basket of freshly picked red apples. Smiling warmly, Lillian notes the boys' lively energy while young Arcel walks beside her, looking slightly embarrassed. Young Arcel admits they once believed cruel rumors and wrongly labeled the kind woman as a witch. Lillian humorously denies the accusations, reminding the boys of how Arcel once doubted her and got hurt. Lillian laughs joyfully, though Ruska grumbles in the background for her to pay more attention to the atmosphere.
Arcel playfully pulls on Rushka's cheek, their childhood rivalry a stark contrast to Lillian's radiant, happy expression.
Placing her hands on their faces, Lillian gazes at them with immense affection, her eyes glowing with warmth. Lillian predicts they will spend much time together, ensuring that a certain child will grow up very happy. The boys listen intently as Lillian speaks of future joys, her hands still resting gently on their cheeks. Lillian hugs the boys tightly amidst the daisies, pleading with them to always be good friends to that child. Snapping back to reality, Arcel finds Ivy peering into his face with concern, asking if he is feeling all right. Panicking at his silence, Ivy quickly retracts her question, telling him he doesn't have to answer her at all. A soft smile touches Arcel's lips as he looks at Ivy, his previous confusion replaced by a gentle calm. Ivy stares back with shimmering eyes, caught off guard by the sudden and unexpected warmth in Arcel's gaze. Gripping her fork, Ivy reflects on the word friends, feeling a deep sense of belonging within the group. A sudden loud shout sounding startles them as Irene and Ruska call out to Evie and Arcel from across the room.
Ruska playfully complains about them keeping Ivy all to themselves, while Irene watches with a stern, judgmental look.
A sudden, quick patter sounding follows Ivy as she bolts toward their friends, leaving Arcel looking quite surprised. Laughing brightly, Ivy urges Arcel to hurry up and join the others for the rest of their meal.
Ruska asks about their secret conversation, but Ivy playfully denies everything as Arcel returns to the table.
A sudden, soft knock sounding precedes a question through the door, asking Irene if she is finally awake. Opening her door with a cheerful greeting, Irene stops mid-sentence as she spots Ivy standing in the hallway. Ivy's eye widens in total shock, her green pupil reflecting her surprise at whatever she is currently witnessing. Ivy stands before a grand mirror, dressed in a beautiful blue gown, looking absolutely stunning and elegant.
Smiling at her reflection, Ivy appears pleased with her appearance as she prepares for the day's special events.
Irene asks if today is a special occasion, realizing Ivy was unaware of the upcoming gift-giving festivities.
A memory surfaces of a father presenting a large gift to a young girl against a decorative background.
Ivy explains her guardian sent an extravagant gift, requiring her to head outside to receive it properly.
Mentioning her late return, Ivy leaves Irene looking devastated by the thought of her friend being gone all day.
Ivy expresses her excitement for her first ever gift day, her eyes sparkling with pure, unadulterated joy and wonder. Irene warns that noble children will be eager to show off, but Ivy remains focused on her own excitement. Irene promises to bring back delicious treats later, prompting an enthusiastic and happy response from a grateful Ivy. Waving goodbye, Irene heads out for her own errands while Ivy prepares to see what her guardian sent. A sudden, loud cheer sounding erupts as Ivy gazes upon a massive mountain of gifts filling the academy lobby. Ivy arrives at the academy lobby, her green eyes wide with excitement for the Guardian's Day festivities. Ivy marvels at the mountain of gifts, while mean-spirited classmates whisper cruel predictions that she will receive nothing. A sudden, loud clap sounding gathers the students' attention as the brown-haired administrator prepares to begin the distribution. The administrator explains that gifts will be distributed by name, sparking a wave of joyful cheers from the crowd. A young blonde girl named Alicia Lydia runs forward with pure delight as she is called to the front. Alicia proudly shows off her new jewel brooch, while Ivy watches the happy scene with a touch of longing. The administrator continues calling names, handing a beautifully wrapped package to a cheerful girl named Hemart Vermeulen. The ceremony continues as more students receive their treasures, their happy shouts echoing throughout the grand hallway. Despite not being called, Ivy remains genuinely happy, finding joy in seeing her fellow classmates so incredibly pleased. Another girl beams with pride while clutching her large gift, her laughter warming the atmosphere of the event. A girl named Lena hurriedly rushes off toward her room, eager to open her gift in private. Mean girls mock Lena's haste, while Ivy reflects that she would be grateful for any gift at all. Thinking she was overlooked, a dejected Ivy decides to leave the lobby and prepare for her classes tomorrow. A sudden, clear call sounding rings out for Evie Alden, causing the shocked blonde girl to stop in place. Ivy stands frozen in disbelief, unable to process the fact that her name was actually called for a gift. Overjoyed, Ivy rushes toward the administrator, who holds out a stunning pink box decorated with a beautiful ribbon. Ivy gazes at the elegant gift in awe, her heart racing as she prepares to receive her first ever present. Her face flushes with a soft blush, her green eyes shimmering with a mixture of nervousness and pure wonder. Reaching out with trembling hands, Ivy carefully takes the pink box, her fingers brushing against the delicate wrapping paper. Surrounded by a dreamlike floral glow, Ivy cherishes the weight of the gift, feeling a profound sense of belonging. Ivy plans to unwrap the gift carefully in her room, but a sudden, cold voice interrupts her quiet moment. Looking back in confusion, Ivy finds herself being addressed by a group of suspicious and judgmental students. A girl with brownish-green hair demands Ivy hand over the gift, insisting on checking it for some supposed mistake. Ivy hesitates as the bully claims something is clearly wrong about a commoner receiving such an expensive-looking gift. The freckled girl cruelly suggests a poorhouse brat like Ivy could only have received such luxury through a clerical error. Ivy recoils in shock, her hands tightening around her precious gift as she faces the girl's baseless and hurtful accusations. The surrounding crowd begins to whisper, doubting that a commoner would even have a guardian capable of sending gifts. Despite Ivy pointing out her name on the tag, the bully insists the name must have been written incorrectly. A sudden, sharp tap sounding of heels cuts through the tension as a commanding voice orders them to stop.
The crowd parts in surprise as a new presence enters the scene, drawing everyone's attention with her natural grace.
A red-haired girl with striking blue eyes steps forward, defending Ivy from the group's hasty and unfair condemnation. Ivy is immediately struck by the newcomer's incredible beauty, wondering who this elegant and noble-looking girl could be. Standing amidst a shower of rose petals, the red-haired girl looks on with a calm and composed expression. The other students whisper in awe, identifying the newcomer as Lady Yzriela while questioning her defense of a commoner. Ivy recognizes Yzriela as a highly respected figure at the academy, her name often mentioned alongside Irene's. The bully girl tries to justify her behavior, pointing out the oddity of a poorhouse commoner receiving a gift. Yzriela remains unmoved, calmly stating that there is no reason Ivy wouldn't have a guardian like anyone else. Sighing with disappointment, Yzriela notes the other girl's persistent suspicion despite having no evidence of any wrongdoing. Turning to Ivy, Yzriela reluctantly suggests a way to end the conflict and clear up the misunderstanding once and for all. Yzriela asks Ivy to open the gift right here in the lobby, proving its contents belong to her. Ivy hesitates, having hoped to save the beautiful wrapping paper, but realizes she has little choice in the matter. Determined to prove the gift is hers, Ivy prepares to unwrap it, despite the uncomfortable pressure of the crowd. Ivy begins to slowly unwrap the pink paper, her movements careful and deliberate to avoid any unnecessary damage. Growing impatient with the slow pace, the freckled girl watches with a look of intense frustration and growing anger. A sudden, violent yank sounding occurs as the bully grabs the gift, shoving a startled Ivy to the floor. A sudden, harsh rip sounding fills the air as the beautiful pink wrapping is torn away and destroyed. The bully girl smirks with cruel satisfaction, believing she has finally exposed Ivy's gift as something cheap and unworthy. Holding a simple wooden box, the bully mocks the gift's poor appearance as proof of Ivy's lowly social standing. Declaring the box too filthy to hold, the girl heartlessly tosses it back at the shocked and trembling Ivy. A sudden, heavy clatter sounding follows the box as it hits the floor, spilling out a single dark sphere. The small wooden box spills its contents as a dark, round stone bounces across the lobby floor with a sudden, heavy clatter sounding. A sudden, soft roll sounding follows the stone as it comes to a stop directly in front of a startled and seated Ivy. Ivy gazes at the plain object in disbelief while surrounding classmates whisper mockingly, questioning if the supposedly grand gift is just a rock. Yzriela and her followers watch with cold amusement, cruelly suggesting that the humble stone perfectly reflects Ivy's lowly social status. The students erupt in laughter, heartlessly joking that the stone must have been picked up from the front yard of a poorhouse. Flushed with intense humiliation, Ivy remains frozen on the floor as a classmate mockingly asks if she is feeling all right. Standing imperiously over the fallen girl, Yzriela remarks that she never imagined the situation would turn out to be so pathetic. Yzriela covers her mouth to hide a smug smile, her blue eyes shimmering with cruel satisfaction despite her feigned words of surprise. A sudden, loud chuckle sounding erupts from the crowd as Yzriela leads her peers in a wave of heartless and mocking laughter. Ivy sits dejectedly amidst the intense ridicule, the harsh voices of the noble students echoing throughout the Grand Academy lobby. A sudden, sharp aha sounding of laughter fills the air while the dark stone remains unmoving on the patterned carpet. Surrounded by the cruel joy of her classmates, Ivy hangs her head in deep shame, feeling small and utterly isolated. Yzriela looks down at Ivy with a patronizing expression, noting that the gift likely holds very little value to someone of status. Defiant despite the mockery, Ivy clutches the stone to her chest and loudly declares to the crowd that it is a precious gift. Ivy's green eyes widen in shock as a sudden, bright hum sounding of hidden power begins to emanate from the dark stone. A brilliant flash of light consumes the scene, leaving the students gasping in confusion as they wonder what is happening. A sudden, low thrum sounding accompanies the stone as it begins to glow with a mesmerizing and intense golden light. The lobby falls into a stunned silence as Ivy stares at the radiating orb, which illuminates the entire hall with its brilliance. A girl with glasses leans forward in total disbelief, her eyes widening as she starts to recognize the object's true, rare nature. Everyone watches in absolute awe as the girl with glasses shouts at the top of her lungs that it is a magic stone. A glowing green gem appears in a narrative vision, identifying it as a mysterious stone that houses immense and concentrated magical power. Narrated text explains that these stones have been prized as treasures since ancient times due to their extreme scarcity and value. The students whisper in frantic excitement, noting that even a tiny fragment of such a stone is worth more than a diamond. Ivy gazes at the glowing artifact with wonder, noting that beyond its light, it radiates a deeply comforting and powerful warmth. A sudden, loud clamor sounding begins as students mob Ivy, desperately begging for a single chance to touch the priceless treasure. Ivy is overwhelmed by the sudden attention, while Yisriela stands paralyzed in the background, her face hidden in the shadows. The mean girls who were just laughing now look on with wide-eyed shock, unable to process Ivy's sudden change in fortune.
Yisriela quickly tries to regain her composure, laughing off the tension and claiming she only found the previous situation amusing.
With a smug and confident look, Yisriela asserts to the crowd that the object in Ivy's hands is actually a fake stone.
Yisriela explains that the capital's seedier markets are currently flooded with convincing imitations being sold as magical artifacts by deceptive peddlers.
Looking down her nose at Ivy, Yisriela declares it is painfully obvious that the gift is nothing more than a cheap fraud.
Yisriela continues her cruel assessment, insisting the stone is a laughable imitation, infused with only a trace of weak, artificial magic.
The crowd's mood shifts back to suspicion as they agree that no one would give a commoner such an expensive gift. Clutching the orb tightly, a dejected Ivy reflects on her luck, wondering why her special moments always seem to end in disaster. A sudden, clear voice sounding rings out through the lobby, causing a startled Ivy to look up with a flicker of recognition. Yisriela's expression hardens into an annoyed and suspicious look as she turns her head toward the source of the unexpected interruption. A silver-haired girl named Irene stands at the top of the grand stairs, her presence commanding the attention of everyone present. Irene gazes down with a stern and cold expression, her violet eyes fixed directly on the group gathered around a humiliated Ivy.
Yisriela smirks at Irene's arrival, noting that her tendency to make flashy entrances hasn't changed a bit since they were younger.
Narration describes Irene as the flower of young high society and the ultimate object of every noble young lady's intense envy.
A memory surfaces of Irene sitting elegantly at a garden tea party, surrounded by other noble girls seeking her favor. Smiling gracefully in the flashback, Irene thanks her guests for attending her party, her beauty and status defining her role in society. A sudden, excited gasp sounding follows as a guest realizes that a highly anticipated person has finally arrived at the event. Irene Terran, the youngest daughter of House Terran, is officially revealed to the high society of the capital amidst a floral backdrop. Back in the past, Yisriela imperiously asks the other students to step aside as she prepares to confront the prestigious newcomer. Welcoming Lady Irene with a polite but shallow smile, Yisriela introduces herself as the host and offers a token of welcome.
Yisriela gestures toward a massive pile of gifts, noting that the table is already overflowing with presents from the other guests.
A sudden, sharp sweep sounding occurs as Yisriela clears the table of gifts she deems subpar to make room for her own.
Irene stands frozen in shock, her eyes wide as she witnesses Yisriela's arrogant and dismissive treatment of the other girls' presents.
Yisriela finally reveals her extravagant gift for Irene, a pair of stunning red shoes adorned with beautiful, large kink bows. Yisriela proudly presents her gift, claiming it is one of only 3 such rare pairs in the entire empire. Telling Irene not to feel burdened, Yisriela is unnerved by the silver-haired girl looking at the gift with unsettling familiarity.
Irene observes the red shoes with a cold gaze, recognizing the design as something she purchased 3 months ago.
Irene informs a shocked Yisriela that this specific shoe style is already considered completely out of fashion in the South. Panic seizes Yisriela, while a sudden, tittering sounding of laughter rises as she recalls the designer's false exclusivity claims. The crowd whispers in admiration of Irene's cool composure as a humiliated Yisriela walks away in deep shame. A sudden, hot flush sounding of embarrassment reddens Yisriela's face as she seethes over being publicly upstaged by Irene.
Narrative text describes Yisriela's growing resentment toward Irene for stealing her spotlight and looking down on her with superiority. Irene stands with an unyielding and aloof expression, her purple eyes reflecting a cold and unshakable confidence. Back in the present lobby, Yisriela thinks bitterly about Irene's habit of appearing at the worst times just to interfere. A sudden click-clack sounding of heels follows Yisriela as she approaches Irene, claiming there has been a slight misunderstanding. Irene demands an explanation, prompting Yisriela to claim she was merely restoring order against Evie's supposedly fake magic stone. A sudden tsk sounding accompanies Yisriela as she patronizingly suggests that Irene is simply unaware of the counterfeit market. A sudden swish sounding of her dress follows as Yisriela spins, detailing the rampant flood of imitation magic stones. A sudden sigh sounding escapes Irene as Yisriela calls her ignorant, while a dejected Evie clutches her glowing treasure. Irene's eyes narrow as she asks Yisriela if she has forgotten that Irene is a member of House Terran. Irene explains that her family handles most magic stone auctions, and she has been trained in the business since childhood. With total authority, Irene asserts that there is no way she would ever fail to identify a genuine magic stone. Swearing on her family's name, Irene declares to the crowd that the object Evie is holding is absolutely genuine. Evie looks at Irene with wide, sparkling green eyes, feeling overwhelmed by the older girl's unexpected and firm defense. Irene coldly brushes past a stunned and speechless Yisriela, ignoring her completely to focus all her attention on Evie. A sudden pitter-patter sounding of footsteps follows Irene while Yisriela stands paralyzed in the shadows of her own defeat. Surrounding students whisper in surprise, realizing Lady Yisriela was mistaken after her arrogant and high-handed display of power. A sudden mumble sounding occurs as Yisriela grinds her teeth, refusing to believe a mere commoner has a real stone. A sudden rustle sounding of movement follows as a classmate checks on Yisriela, whose face is hidden in dark shadow. The classmate tries to comfort Yisriela, arguing that Irene was too harsh despite Yisriela's reasoning making perfect sense. Narrative text notes that Irene has been acting way too soft toward the commoner girl during their academy time. A sudden snap sounding occurs as Yisriela turns her head sharply, a malicious and calculating look entering her eyes. Watching the interaction, Yisriela realizes that Irene has finally developed a significant and exploitable weakness through the blonde girl. Irene looks at Evie with genuine worry and affection, admitting she would have been devastated if the girl got hurt. Watching Irene's hands, Yisriela is stunned, wondering if the aloof silver-haired girl has ever shown such raw emotion before. A sudden tsk sounding of malicious joy follows Yisriela's smirk as she plots to use Irene's new vulnerability against her. Surrounded by a shimmering glow, Irene and Evie share a warm moment of connection, unaware of the predatory gaze nearby. The scene transitions to the Academy Towers before showing a blonde man working diligently at a desk within his office. A sudden scratch sounding of the pen stops as the blonde man pauses, a mysterious magical crest visible on his hand. A sudden tap sounding occurs as the blonde man turns toward the door,
alerted to a visitor's arrival at night. A caption reveals the scene takes place at night, shortly before the official opening ceremony of the new academy term. A sudden knock sounding prompts the blonde man to grant entry into the moonlit and opulent office. An elderly official apologizes for the late hour, wishing to discuss a difficult guardian selection for a specific new student. The blonde man asks if the student in question is the child he personally selected, and the official confirms it. The elderly official explains that while reviewing guardians, he is struggling with the selection process for this particular girl. Piles of documents reveal that many greedy nobles are desperate to be the guardian since the Majesty personally selected her. Rubbing his forehead, the blonde man hears that nobles only want to use the workhouse commoner for their own profit. Standing before a portrait of a missing professor, the official suggests using a fictional person to secure the girl's position. The blonde man asks for the name of the professor who never returned from the war to use as cover. Approving the plan from his desk, the blonde man agrees to use the name Cien Roche as the child's guardian. Chibi memories depict the blonde man meeting the girl as the professor Cien Roche, recalling his decision to help her. Back in the present, the blonde man sits at his desk, reflecting on his opportunity to take responsibility for the child. Looking at a massive stack of presents, the man notes that most people usually only send a single gift. The blonde man gazes out with a warm but somber look, hoping the gift can illuminate the child's lonely life. Ivy smiles warmly while clutching her glowing orb, reflecting on how far she has come from her lonely past. Ivy gazes thoughtfully at a wooden jewelry box filled with delicate ribbons resting on the plush green sofa. Irene sits beside Ivy, curiously asking why the girl bothered to save the torn remnants of the gift's wrapping paper. Blushing slightly, Ivy explains her desire to treasure every single part of the first gift her guardian ever sent. Irene becomes visibly enraged at the thought of the gift being mistreated, while a startled Ivy tries to calm her. With a gentle expression, Ivy reassures her friend that she is truly okay now, despite the earlier conflict. A close-up of Ivy's vibrant green eye reveals the deep, lingering impact of being ignored and teased by others. Ivy sits peacefully among falling petals, holding her precious treasure close, while the box of ribbons sits nearby. Chibi panels show Ivy questioning Irene's early return, as the silver-haired girl was supposed to be gone until evening. Irene explains she rushed back to retrieve her forgotten hat, fearing her family's strict lectures regarding proper noble formality. Leaning in for a supportive hug, Irene asks if Ivy felt lonely and offers to spend the day together. A sudden rub sounding occurs as Irene nuzzles Ivy, who happily admits that Irene's support is all she needs. Ivy mentions her gratitude for keeping the gift, even if it is fake, leaving a confused Irene completely speechless. Assuming Irene only claimed the stone was real to protect her feelings, Ivy thanks her for the kind gesture. Irene is taken aback, firmly asserting that her family's pride prevents her from ever lying about the quality of goods. Irene clarifies that the stone is no common knockoff, noting its unique properties despite most powerful stones being restricted. Chibi panels depict Ivy's curiosity about the rarity of magic stones, prompting Irene to explain their massive auction value. Ivy is paralyzed with shock as Irene reveals the stone is worth an astronomical 10 million gold. While Irene praises the Guardian's devotion, a trembling Ivy becomes overwhelmed by the stone's value and considers returning it. A sudden grab sounding occurs as Ivy's hand trembles while reaching out, her mind racing with anxiety over the gift. Preparing to depart again, Irene asks about Ivy's afternoon plans, only to hear the girl intends to attend class. Irene informs a surprised Ivy that classes have been canceled for the day, leaving the blonde girl momentarily confused. Ivy learns that Guardian's Day serves as a holiday, leaving her to process the unexpected break in her schedule. Chibi Irene cheerfully tucks Ivy into bed, insisting she rest in the room after the morning's stressful events.
Irene's sharp eyes notice a mysterious mark on Ivy's hand, causing the younger girl to freeze in sudden panic.
Ivy quickly dismisses the observation as mere dust, while Irene encourages her to wipe it off before leaving.
Hiding under her covers, Ivy breathes a sigh of relief that Irene did not realize the mark's true nature. A sudden rub sounding follows as Ivy touches the mark, wondering why it appeared so suddenly on her hand. Ivy hides her face in distress, terrified that she will be hated if anyone discovers the mysterious glowing mark. Lying alone in her room, Ivy desperately prays for the strange mark to disappear before anyone else sees it. The scene shifts to the Academy's grand spires as the warm glow of the setting sun bathes the campus. A sudden startle sounding occurs as Ivy sits up abruptly in bed, realizing she fell asleep in her uniform. Ivy looks out at the deepening twilight, surprised that she slept long enough for the sun to begin setting. Checking her hands, Ivy is relieved she didn't drop the expensive magic stone while she was deep in sleep. Ivy carefully moves to place the glowing orb back into its wooden box for safekeeping until she finds answers.
Upon opening the box, Ivy's eyes go wide as she notices an unexpected item resting among the ribbons.
Inside the box lies the handkerchief Ivy lost at the Imperial graves, confirming the identity of her mysterious guardian. Ivy clutches the cloth as her heart races, realizing the true connection between the professor and her new life. A memory surfaces of Professor Cyan standing in the woods, his blonde hair catching the light of a similar sunset. A sudden dash sounding follows Ivy as she runs through the forest, determined to find the professor at sunset. Ivy hopes to reach the meeting spot before nightfall, eager to thank Professor Cyan for his overwhelming kindness. A sudden rustle sounding occurs as Ivy pushes through the thick bushes, her eyes searching the clearing ahead.
Ivy intends to ask if the rare gift was sent by mistake, fully prepared to return it if necessary.
Ivy spots a man's silhouette standing near the graves, his presence matching the memory of their first meeting. With a hopeful shout, Ivy calls out to Professor Cyan, her voice echoing through the quiet, sun-drenched clearing. A sudden hum sounding emanates from the orb in Ivy's hands as a mysterious golden crest begins to glow. The magical crest on the back of Ivy's hand resonates with the stone, pulsing with a brilliant golden light. The blonde man turns his head at the sound of his name, his calm expression shifting into mild surprise. Overjoyed to see him, Ivy rushes forward but suddenly trips, tumbling into the grass with a startled cry. Ivy looks up from the ground with a flustered expression, embarrassed by her clumsy arrival before the professor. Cyan helps Ivy up as she excitedly greets the professor she hasn't seen in a while. While Cyan questions her presence, Ivy nervously explains her habit of taking this specific forest path. Cyan notices her hand and worries she's hurt, but Ivy insists it's only a minor itch. Concerned she was scratched by bushes, Cyan insists on checking her hand despite Ivy's protests. Ivy stares with wide, startled eyes as she processes the sudden proximity and attention from her guardian. Looking down at her palm, Ivy is stunned to find the mysterious mark has completely vanished. A wave of relief washes over Ivy while Cyan continues to watch her with quiet, focused intensity. Cyan's expression remains unreadable and somber as he studies the child he has chosen to protect. Ivy beams with joy, her clothing slightly torn from the thorns, but her spirit remaining entirely unscathed. With a grateful heart, Ivy thanks Cyan for the magical gift and the returned handkerchief she lost. Cyan offers a rare, soft smile while Ivy animatedly describes the amazing properties of the glowing stone. Touched but hesitant, Ivy asks if he truly intended to give her such an incredibly expensive treasure. Reassuring her with a gentle head pat, Cyan expresses his genuine happiness that she appreciates the gift.
Sion casually dismisses the stone's value, leaving a shocked Ivy to marvel at his immense household wealth. As the sun sets, Ivy gathers her courage to ask the professor one more important question. Sion is caught completely off guard when Ivy asks for the specific name of the class he teaches.
Ivy explains her inability to find his name on any rosters, causing Sion to break into a nervous sweat.
Thinking quickly, Sion claims he decided to skip teaching this semester, causing Ivy's face to fall in disappointment. A sudden spark of determination enters Ivy's eyes as she leans in, catching Sion by surprise. Sion looks on with a hint of concern, his secret cover as a professor clearly under pressure.
The scene transitions to the majestic academy towers standing tall under the soft light of a clear sky. Back in his office, Sion surprises a green-haired official by demanding a professor's office at the academy. The official is bewildered by his sudden commitment, but Sion insists since Ivy is actively searching for him.
Thinking she has a better solution, the green-haired woman prepares to offer an alternative plan.
She suggests replacing the fictional professor with a real, perfect candidate who just became available. She recommends her former mentor, Professor Malice, noting Sion is already far too busy with state affairs. A sudden snap sounding occurs as Sion slams his marked hand down, flatly rejecting the proposal. Sion sternly commands her to prepare the office as requested, leaving the woman completely baffled by his refusal. Claiming a mountain of work, Sion walks away and shuts the door, effectively ending the conversation.
Standing alone outside the door, the green-haired official is left in a state of utter shock and confusion.
A realization strikes the official that Sion actually has no intention of relinquishing his role in Ivy's life.
A sudden ding sounding of academy bells rings out over the sprawling city as a new day begins.
Inside the classroom, Professor Malice concludes the day's lesson and prepares to make a special announcement. The 4 young students react with excitement as they learn they are being moved to a new classroom. Malice explains that while the room is small, it is perfectly sized for their specialized group of 4.
The students cheer at the news that the new space will also serve as their private lounge. Their joy turns to dread as Melez warns that missing homework will result in an immediate ban.
A sudden ding-sounding clock signals the end of class as Professor Melez bids the students farewell.
Irene collapses onto the wooden desk, exhausted by the thought of returning home for the upcoming weekend. Hugging Ivy, Irene asks if there is any possible way she can skip her family visit to stay.
The red-haired boy explains it's the first outing of the term, while Irene playfully squishes Ivy's cheek.
He notes that everyone is expected home, and even the academy staff are taking the day off. Irene sighs about her exhausting family gathering, while the red-haired boy dreads sparring sessions with his brothers. Ivy turns to Arcel, who confirms he is heading to his nearby estate to fetch more books. Turning the question to Ivy, the red-haired boy asks if she has any plans to leave the academy.
Arcel and Irene look concerned, realizing Ivy would be entirely alone at the academy for the weekend.
Ivy explains her former home is too far, but insists she is perfectly comfortable being by herself.
Hoping to cheer her up, the red-haired boy suggests she visit the local festival instead.
A sudden whack sounding occurs as stars erupt across the screen, indicating a double physical strike.
Irene and Arcel make excuses about catching bugs while their red-haired classmate lies defeated on the desk.
The red-haired boy complains about being hit while his friends playfully tell him to read the room.
A bustling scene unfolds at the academy entrance as families gather to welcome their children home for break.
A mother kneels to embrace her young daughter, both overcome with joy after being apart for the term.
Another pair of parents hold their daughter's hands, warmly asking about her experiences during her time at academy.
Ivy stands alone on the stairs, waving goodbye as Irene and Arcel depart for the weekend with their families. Left behind, Ivy gazes after her friends, reflecting on the words she couldn't bring herself to say earlier.
Walking through the quiet, sun-drenched hallway, Ivy admits to herself that she secretly wishes to see the festival. Looking out the window, Ivy recalls seeing the capital's glamour only briefly through a carriage window on enrollment day. She gazes at the twilight sky, the memory of that brief, thrilling scenery remaining etched in her mind forever. A close-up of Ivy's shimmering green eyes reveals her deep longing to experience the world beyond the academy walls. Remembering she cannot leave without a guardian, Ivy decides to spend the evening reading alone in her room. Continuing down the hall, Ivy notes that the silence of the empty academy feels awkward and strangely unsettling. A sudden chill runs down her spine as the dark, cavernous hallway begins to feel genuinely scary to her. Overwhelmed by the eerie atmosphere, Ivy begins to run, desperate to reach the comfort and safety of her room. A sudden rattle sounding occurs as Ivy stops in her tracks, noticing a door slightly ajar down the hall. Peering cautiously into the room, Ivy lets out a gasp of utter shock at the unexpected sight before her. Professor Cyan stands inside the room, leaning against a tall pillar with a calm and welcoming expression. Cyan waits patiently in the soft light of the office, his presence radiating a sense of quiet authority. Cyan kneels to Ivy's level and offers a gentle head pat, surprising the girl with his sudden, kind appearance. Ivy stares up at her guardian with wide, wonder-filled eyes, still processing that he is actually there at the academy. Overjoyed to see him, Ivy lunges forward and gives Cyan a tight hug, exclaiming her delight at his presence. Cyan freezes in comical shock as Ivy clings to him, her enthusiastic and sudden greeting catching him completely off guard. After pulling back, Ivy asks the professor what business could have possibly brought him to the academy so late. Cyan begins to explain his presence, his eyes softening as he looks down at the excited young girl. The scene shifts to the academy's grand towers as the sky transitions into a deep, starlit twilight. Ivy gazes around the office in awe, commenting on how neat and wonderful the professor's workspace appears to be. Cyan explains that he wanted to show her around his official office, delighting the starry-eyed girl with the tour. Ivy runs toward the massive bookshelves, amazed by the sheer number of volumes stored in the professor's collection. A nervous Cyan confirms he has read every book, while Ivy marvels at his intelligence and incredible dedication. Cyan tries to maintain a dignified, professional appearance, though the weight of his secret role clearly stresses him. Ivy scans the titles, confused by the wide variety of rare languages like Rashid and Rambad on the shelves. Cyan realizes that Serafina went far too overboard when preparing the rare language professor cover for his fake office. Cyan stands amidst the glowing, book-filled room, looking slightly overwhelmed by the elaborate facade he must now maintain. Ivy excitedly asks if she can visit him later whenever she encounters something she doesn't understand in her studies. While Cyan mentions other professors, a chibi Ivy insists she would work much harder if she learned from him. Touched by her earnest request, Cyan promises to make time for her whenever she needs help with her education. Ivy is moved to tears by his overwhelming kindness, while Cyan admits he is completely weak to her face. Cyan suggests she leave a letter on his desk if he's not around, and Ivy happily agrees to the plan. A sudden boom sounding of fireworks startles Ivy as she stands beside the professor in the quiet office. Ivy's eyes widen in surprise as a bright light illuminates the room, drawing her gaze toward the large window. Cyan explains that the city festival has finally begun as colorful fireworks explode across the darkened night sky. While Cyan finds the display noisy and unnecessary, Ivy is completely captivated by the brilliant lights over the city. Ivy places her hand against the glass, letting out a soft wow as she watches the fireworks shimmer. Mesmerized by the spectacle, Ivy exclaims that the festival lights are the most beautiful thing she has ever seen.
Cyan watches Ivy with a quiet, pensive expression, noting how much she truly enjoys the simple, festive celebration.
Cyan catches Ivy off guard by asking if she would like to go down and see the festival herself.
Ivy hesitantly declines, claiming she isn't that curious and it's getting late, despite her clear interest in going. Cyan expresses deep disappointment, claiming he had truly hoped to see the festival together with her tonight.
Seeing Cyan's fake loneliness, a panicked Ivy reacts comically as her resolve quickly crumbles under his subtle guilt. Ivy shouts her change of heart, admitting she loves festivals and desperately wants to go with the professor. Cyan wears a subtle, satisfied smirk, pleased that his little nudge worked perfectly on the hesitant Ivy. The city festival is alive with vibrant banners and glowing lanterns, filled with the sounds of a noisy crowd. Cyan and Ivy arrive at the bustling celebration, where the young girl is immediately mesmerized by the magical atmosphere. Cyan gently offers his hand to Ivy, ensuring they stay close together amidst the sea of excited festival-goers.
Cyan looks down at his ward with paternal warmth, while Ivy stares back with shimmering, wonder-filled green eyes. Hand in hand, they begin their evening stroll, walking through the sparkling lights and festive energy of the capital.
A sudden, loud cheer sounding nearby draws Ivy's attention to a stall displaying rows of glistening meat skewers. They pass a shop filled with glittering jewelry and trinkets, catching the light as the crowd surges around them. A sudden, quick stop sounding occurs as Ivy freezes in place, her attention captured by a nearby attraction.
Pointing eagerly toward a booth, Ivy asks the professor what kind of game the people are playing over there.
Cyan explains it is a balloon dart game where successfully hitting a target earns the player various prizes.
Cyan encourages her to try, but a flustered Ivy frantically declines, insisting she is fine just watching others.
Despite her polite refusal, Ivy's intense gaze and clasped hands reveal how much she secretly wishes to play. Trying to hide her longing, Ivy tugs on Cyan's arm and suggests they move on to look at something else. Cyan realizes with a heavy heart that Ivy is habitually suppressing her own happiness to avoid being a burden. Sensing his hesitation, Ivy looks back with a questioning glance as Cyan remains rooted to the spot. Cyan decides to step up to the booth himself, announcing he'll play around while Ivy reacts with surprise. A worried Ivy tries to talk him out of it, repeating that she really doesn't need to play.
Cyan gives her a confident, charming grin and tells her not to worry about his sudden competitive streak.
Ivy waits with bated breath, her hands clenched in excitement as she prepares to watch the professor's dart skills. The stall owner hands Cyan 3 darts, while a tiny, nervous chibi version of Ivy looks on with anticipation. Ivy cheers enthusiastically, telling the professor she knows he will definitely succeed in winning a prize for them. A sudden, sharp thud sounding occurs as the first dart misses by a mile, leaving both of them stunned. Unfazed, Ivy offers helpful tactical advice, suggesting the professor aim a bit more to the right for his next throw. A sudden, loud bang sounding happens as the second dart nearly hits the terrified shopkeeper instead of a balloon. Cyan sighs dramatically, claiming the game is far too difficult because it was clearly designed for much smaller children. Turning the tables, Cyan asks Ivy if she would be willing to step in and save him from embarrassment. Cyan kneels and places the final dart in Ivy's hand, telling her he's counting on her to win. Determined not to let the professor down, Ivy agrees to do her absolute best with their very last chance. Ivy takes a deep, steadying breath and focuses all her attention on the target with intense, sparkling eyes. With a sudden, swift whoosh sounding, Ivy throws the dart with every bit of her newfound resolve and hope. The shopkeeper congratulates Ivy on her perfect hit, much to the young girl's shock and burgeoning delight. The prize is revealed to be a soft pink squirrel doll, adorned with a bright yellow bow. Ivy hops with pure joy, holding the doll and urging Cyan to take it since she won it for him.
Cyan is surprised when Ivy admits the squirrel wasn't actually the specific prize she had her eye on.
Ivy gazes longingly at the much larger bear on the shelf, finally admitting what she truly wanted all along.
Cyan teasingly suggests returning the squirrel since it's not the right one, sending Ivy into a comical panic.
Realizing she can keep it, Ivy squeezes the doll tight while Cyan celebrates the success of his subtle plan. Ivy looks down at her new friend, marveling at the fact that she finally owns something just for herself.
Overcome with emotion, Ivy hugs the squirrel tight to her chest, her face glowing with genuine, unbridled happiness.
Cyan watches her with a contented look, though Ivy is far too busy celebrating to notice his quiet gaze.
Cyan suggests finding something else to see, and a beaming Ivy is more than happy to follow his lead.
As they turn to leave, a sudden surge in the crowd separates them, catching Cyan completely off guard. Cyan looks back over his shoulder with a nervous sweat, frantically checking to see if Ivy is still behind him. A sudden, chilling zoom sounding occurs as Cyan's eyes fill with absolute horror at the empty space beside him.
Standing alone in the middle of the crowded festival street, Cyan calls out Ivy's name in a desperate panic.